Thank you for your patience.
Welcome back, everybody. It's an exciting meeting today. We have our new members present. So welcome. We're going to start the day by going through the room. I think it'd be helpful to introduce ourselves so everybody new knows that the old people and us old people can meet the new people. So
You're an old people. I'm hilarious.
Older by the day, that's for sure. Older by the meeting, I should say. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a few people online as well. And so maybe we start around the room, and it may be good to start online. So I see we have Darlene Fairchild. You'd like to introduce yourself and say who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Yep. Good morning. I live in Bryan College Station. I work for a university title. I'm the VP and compliance officer. So I've been in the title business 34 years, and I'm fairly new to the committee. So glad to be here.
All right. So it looks like we have Chairman Scott Kesner, who's one of our committee liaisons as well.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
All right. And then we have Renee Harvey Lowe.
Good morning.
Liaisons. All right. If you can say a little bit about yourself.
I'm a real estate broker with Century 21 Harvey Properties in Northeast Texas. I've been in the business for almost 40 years and a new commissioner, and happy to serve.
Awesome. Well, welcome. We're glad to have you as a liaison to the committee. Welcome. Let's see, who else do we have online? We don't have, so shortly we'll probably have Jason Hartgraves join us, and we'll come back to him if he joins us on the call. So we'll go around the room.
Sure. Hi, y'all. I am Melissa Haley. I am from Plano, Texas. Independent real estate broker, and been in the business almost 20 years.
All right. Thank you. Welcome.
Christy Tatum Jansen, been in the business 18 years, Waxahachie, Texas, broker associate and co-franchise owner for Keller Williams, Ellis County, and I am beyond excited to be here.
All right. Like,
she's beyond excited.
Yeah, it'd be nice right now. She hasn't been through a whole meeting yet, so we'll see how that smile changes.
So excited.
Yeah, we'll fix that. And for everybody who's maybe listening online, there are two new broker members, and broker members are appointed by the Texas Real Estate Commission to 6-year terms. So this is her first meeting of 6 years ahead. So welcome.
Excellent. Ms. Ron Walker, serve on the broker side and also an attorney.
So,
Mary Miner, Williamson County, broker.
Tony Malley, serving on the lawyer side, but also a broker.
I'm S.J. Swanson. I'm from Houston, and I'm a lawyer, not a title company person, not a broker.
we're weighted on this side of the table.
I know y'all are pulling it down. I'm serving my second term with my partner over here. I think we have two something years.
I think that's right.
Left. So watch out. We're going to be trying to leave our mark.
Mark the word. I'm Diane McCoy from Houston. I'm the Director of Compliance and Education for Better Homes and Gardens Real Estate Gary Green in Houston. October, I will be a licensed broker in Texas for 40 years.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
And this is my first 6-year term, and enjoying it thoroughly. And welcome, ladies.
And I'm Amy Slusher. I'm an attorney. I'm in Lufkin, Texas, so I'm one of the small town girls on here. And our, I guess I have to say, since you said you're not title, I'm not really title either, but our firm does have a title company, so maybe I do both. But anyway, like SJ said, second 6-year term. We've just got a couple years left, and we'll be saying sayonara to all of you. But it's been a good time, so welcome. Glad to have y'all.
Was I supposed to disclaim title work too?
I don't do title work. You need badges or something, so you don't need it.
Just was razzing.
Lee York, a broker from Fort Worth.
All right. John George, attorney member, current co-chair with Mr. Walker as the other co-chair. I was a practicing litigation attorney for a while, moved to the transactional side, then the title side, and then now I'm recovering from the title side into new ventures on the business side outside of kind of both. It's going to be a new venture that is coming up next year. So it's going to be exciting to get on a different side. But welcome to the committee. And I just was reappointed. So the lawyers on the committee are appointed by the state bar president. And so we had 2 going out there. Generally you get 2 terms. And so I was reappointed for my 2nd term. So I'm just starting that. And then we'll make it down room to Mr. Watts.
Brian Watts, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 41 years. I've been in the title business for 30 of those years. I am with First American Title Company. I'm the Texas Regional Underwriting Director. And right now I'm officing out of Irving, Texas.
Hi, I'm Leigh Trezal, born and bred in Austin, lived here my entire life. President and General Counsel of Texas National Title, so fully ensconced title side.
John behind you.
All right, yep,
That we
we'll
like.
go around the backside. These are those people that keep us moving and behind the scenes, so much work outside the meetings and keeping us straight. So let me say in advance, thank you before you introduce yourself.
Abby Lee, Deputy General Counsel.
And I'm Vanessa Burgess, General Counsel, and it's not a full-time job to keep you guys in line. Maybe for Amber it is.
They delegated.
Yeah, it's maybe a little bit more.
Yeah. All right, then we have a few guests in the room. In the back there, this is Fabian Saldana. He's my business partner. He's from Houston. He's a home builder, remodeler. And will you come?
Clarissa Valdez on the IT personnel here. Check.
She's just working on my computer.
All right. Let's see, and who do we have online? We haven't, let's see, Amber, I guess that's for the one here. Looks like that's everybody. All right, well, welcome. We'll try to make it a fun meeting. It's looks like we have a fairly short packet today in terms of comments. There's a lot of forms to go over. And then if Jason Hargraves joins us, we'll make sure to introduce him around the table as well. So first, I don't think we have any, but any public comment on non-agenda items? Do we receive any? Nope. Okay. So having received no public comments, we'll move to the third agenda item, reports from BLC working groups. And if somebody can help me here, I believe we have 2 working groups right now, the backup addendum in the new home contracts. Is that correct?
There's another one.
And Farm and Ranch is still active, right?
Well, and then last meeting, we created another working group for recent legislation, which has not met.
Okay.
And I would say the purpose we have not met is because the legislators can't stop meeting. So there's 4 that I'm aware of.
Okay. And we're in the 3rd special session right now. Yep. Okay,
But
so
not the last.
No, they're gonna keep going.
it's a marathon this time. So we'll start with the backup addendum working group. Who is on that?
You are. And I
We haven't
are.
met, okay.
And Ron is, the 3 of us. And at the last meeting, we didn't discuss anything, and our committee really has not met formally. Early on, the meeting before last, I submitted to TREC leadership and to both co-chairs. I just appointed you co-chair of our working group. My suggestion for conversation and discussion, I think that, so this is kind of an informal, we did not meet, but if I may just comment that maybe somewhere that the chair feels appropriate, we could have a discussion about the backup addendum based on the confusion that I see. I deal with 1,100 agents and I teach Legal 1 and 2. So I get the feedback from the agents, and TREC included in Legal 1 and 2 conversations about the backup addendum. And agents are confused about it because of the wording in paragraph 5. And so when I submitted my suggestions, it was to make an amendment to the backup addendum to clarify the earnest money, the option fee that would be contributed at the time a backup contract goes into place with the appropriate contract and backup addendum. Using paragraph 5 in and of itself, speaking of additional earnest money has been suggested, makes reference to the effective date and how many days from the effective date funds would be deposited, likewise the option period. But in a backup situation, you don't know what those are. So the broker agent feels like they are, and we've schooled them well on the unauthorized practice of law, because they don't want to put anything in special provisions. However, how do you clearly state how much earnest money and option fee is being deposited, and when does the option fee go into place? So the suggestions I made were to clarify that, to make it easier for the agent to indicate what that is on the backup addendum. And I did just coincidentally bring along those samples that I doctored up our forms. And then I added another line to say in paragraph 5, this is or is not a backup contract, again for clarification, and making reference to the attached backup addendum. So I think it is a long requested change and clarification in those areas for agent use without practicing law and doctoring up things. There is an amended effective date that goes into effect with the backup. And paragraph 5 talks about the effective date. It is the effective date of the backup contract, but it is only a backup contract. Deposit and potentially additional earnest money. Why would a buyer want to deposit $5,000 and have it held there if they don't know they're ever going to go in first place? That's the point there. So I would like to have at some point, and it looks like we may be having new contracts coming out in February of next year, give some consideration to making that a more usable addendum. It hasn't been looked at for a while, so that agents use the backup contract more frequently, feel more comfortable that they aren't practicing law.
And I like this discussion that we take back to our working group, especially with our new members here as brokers. One of the backup addendum, when you have the backup contract, we know the option money and earnest money has to be paid timely up front, just like it's in a first place contract.
Sure.
And the issue that we historically spoke about is some people write in, well, we're going to pay X amount now. And if we ever go in the first place, we're going to pay this much more. And there was a discussion back and forth of whether we wanted to do that to begin with, knowing that it is an issue, not knowing how big it is. Do we want to take some steps to revise the language, which she's done a very good job of providing suggestions on that. But let's see it up to y'all. What do you feel in your practice and see in terms of the backup addendum and request for that?
All the time. So we see special provisions written all the time or additional language added that will put 250 earnest money down initially, and then we'll see statements such as 48 hours of the amended effective date, additional earnest money in the amount of 2,500 deposited when it moves into first position. That is very frequent. So I do agree that language needs to be changed so that we don't have to add that, and it gives the additional options to do that. Because most buyers do not want to deposit the big amounts of money up front, but they'll do a little bit, but then the seller still wants to see the larger sum of earnest money deposited before they move into first position.
Yeah, similar.
Same thing, 100%. They either write it into special provisions or they argue with me because they put it under additional earnest money to be deposited in so many days. And then they argue with me that I don't have to pay that right now.
Yeah.
Y'all do
Earnest
know
money
that-
has two places.
Yeah, you do know that it's 100% inappropriate to write that in special provisions. I mean,
Yeah.
Then that's the-
yes, that is absolutely inappropriate.
Yeah, we understand.
Agents should not be doing that.
And that's the concern that's being raised, I think. During this 2 meetings ago, I think when we first talked about it, there wasn't a big interest in doing it, I think, overall. And I remember us having the conversation, let's look at it to see, but I've been hearing about it a lot more since that meeting. And it seems like
It is happening.
interest from there.
Well, the good news is we're finally using the
I
backup
know,
addendum,
but
because for years, nobody ever used it. So I think it has stood as is for a long time because it wasn't being used. Now we're using it. I think we do have an opportunity to at least tweak it.
Yeah, let's have one conversation. Go ahead,
So we're
Tony.
tweaking it, is the undertone, the rationale that buyer just doesn't want to put their full earnest money up if they're number 2 and not number 1.
Correct.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
That, and then agents are writing this in when they shouldn't and being requested to. And so we're trying to
But we
meet
both,
the forms with the practice.
we know these new members are going to hear us probably say this a lot, as kindly as we can about present company excluded, that brokers and agents will still do what they want to do and still kind of mess it up. Even if they're not supposed to do it, they'll still find another blank to write something they shouldn't.
But the earnest, we have 2 spots for the earnest money on the contract.
Yes.
Yeah, we
So
do.
I don't understand that. I understand option totally because people don't want to put a lot of
So
option down.
remember,
But we have 2 places for
Sorry.
earnest.
in paragraph 5, it gives a specific date for the payment of the additional earnest money.
And you don't know.
But unfortunately, with the backup contract, it's a floating date. You don't know when you're going to become the primary contract. And so paragraph 5 doesn't exactly work. Everybody's been absolutely correct. You know, the backup contract, if you spend time, you understand what it says, but people don't understand. It can be made a whole lot more clear. I have to spend, if I give a talk to agents, I have to spend 10 minutes explaining to them, everything. And it shouldn't take 10 minutes to explain it.
But doesn't the effective date change?
Yes.
If it comes into, so then it actually works just fine because.
Oh, it
paragraph five
absolutely
says
works.
Blah, 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 second part on the effective date. So when the effective date occurs, then that is the date.
Does the earnest money to be paid?
That's correct. If you
Well,
look
no,
at it.
I'll respectfully disagree because it does say that if in paragraph B says, if the first contract does not terminate by a certain date, the backup contract terminates and the earnest money will be refunded to buyer. That therefore means that there was earnest money to be refunded,
Yes.
indicating that
They can
the
make
earnest
it
money
up.
was to initially be paid when the contract is signed.
But it could be $50.
And then.
And then the
buyers-
rest on the second one.
And having this discussion is the exact reason I agree that we need to fix this and make it a lot more.
Well, and this is helpful, I think, going around and another comment.
Oh, I was just gonna say, we were doing a lot more backup contracts in the heat of the pandemic than I'm seeing today. So yes, it's still problematic. And I agree that you're right. What we maybe should be teaching them is use 5A1, put the bigger amount in there, and then just say like 20 days or 30 days, like a long time, pick some longer time. Unfortunately, we don't know what the time is, but they could use the contract and still be in compliance the way it's
So I'm
written.
saying the effective date changes when.
Well, then maybe we
So you don't
should
even
say
have to
within
put
blank
anything longer.
days after the amended effective date according to a backup contract. That would be a great way to have it worded.
Is it called the amended effective date or is it
Yes.
called?
Yes.
No, it's called the amended effective date.
Well, the terminology amended is not there. It just makes reference to
Sure.
a later time that when the date of the contract will be. And that's perfectly fine
Yeah.
for attorneys that deal with this every day. We're dealing with agents who should understand those things. Totally agree. I think we all agree. But when that backup contract comes out and they are schooled to realize that there is an amended effective date, that you put the offer in on September 1st, and now you find out that the first contract's gone away, and now you have an amended effective date of the 13th of October. Now, all of your dates in the contract click out. If there is additional funds due, because that buyer said, well, I got to keep looking because I don't know if I'm ever going to get this house or not. And the seller wants $5,000, but I need that money. Yes, they could terminate and get it back, but there's a time period involved. So I think we've made a simple situation complicated, and maybe it's, as I think the majority of us have been saying, it's time to look at it and see if we can find a place where if there is going to be the smaller amount up front while the buyer is continuing to look and to wait to see if they're in first place, and a larger amount that is what the seller wants, so the buyer knows up front, then it's all there and running the way it's supposed to be.
Let me ask a question. On the use, is the additional earnest money in paragraph 5, is it used mostly with the backup addendum or for other purposes?
Other purposes.
Other purpose.
Okay.
I don't think it's hardly
The
ever
right
used.
to terminate. I don't want to put up earnest money until I go hard.
Well, I mean,
Until they're
this committee should have a meeting before they report about a meeting that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Well, no, this is getting us feedback now with the new members to go back. And so this is what I was teeing up to. Now with this feedback, we can go back, and I don't know if either one of you want to join
I would love to join that.
Okay, awesome. So we'll add that, and this is good feedback that, because it's been a couple meetings since we talked about it. And I feel a big shift from the last time we talked about this. I think the shift was leaning to not doing it before, and I feel like we're leaning to doing it now, making some change. So I like that.
So the conclusion is that this backup addendum will no longer take a back seat. I'm sorry.
Okay, an important overriding thing that everybody needs to be reminded of, especially the new folks, are the dates of when changes occur. And y'all correct me if my summary is not accurate. At this moment, we have been gathering a bunch of changes, some administrative and some clarification and some material to be submitted by November or whenever. We're not in, and plus we have now we're waiting on the ledge again for 3 and maybe 4th session, right? But we're gathering up things. The general idea is that we don't amend these contracts every day or every meeting or every year, because it causes confusion and more training that people obviously don't listen to in the first place always. So it's important to kind of gather those changes in, but also you can't draw them out too long, because we want to turn these changes in, timely at some point. So,
and can you explain for them the if you want to, since you're talking about it, the process briefly on the timing of when we do this?
We are a committee of the Real Estate Commission. We are charged, and I would suggest strongly, if you haven't, get out the Real Estate License Act and read it, read the whole thing. And it talks about how the commission is formed and what they do. And it talks about our committee and what we do. But our authority is to recommend, and then we send it up to the commission. So there's timing about our meetings, and all of them are already scheduled that way. Our meetings are set blah, 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 so far ahead of the commission meeting, so that staff can do the gathering and the amending and putting the package together for the commission. By law, there's certain notice that has to be given. Then the commission makes decisions about, do they agree with us? Or sometimes, very rarely, right, Chair, very rarely do they disagree, and they'll send it back to us and say, well, no, or we like that, but you need more, or go another way, or whatever it is. And then if they do, then we redo, and then it goes back up. But then they'll accept our changes, and then under the law, everything has to be published in the register out there in the world, and specifically for the real estate community and the public to come back and comment on proposed changes. And then we get those comments, and then we look at those, and then it goes to the next step. Either we change or we don't, and then it, can become how the bill becomes a law, if y'all are old enough to remember that little song.
So creating something like this right now is not going to make the February contract.
No, it could, but I'm just saying.
You think it could?
I don't know that we have a February contract. That's a running date, because that was the last time when we met. That was our aim, but that may be changed.
And we try to do the changes together too. Right. So not every meeting we're throwing out new changes to teach. And there's several loose rules that we follow. One's a 5% rule. If it doesn't impact more than 5% of transactions, we generally try to shy away from those changes. Not that we won't do it, but maybe we save those up in a bucket to do all at once. Or maybe it's not big enough. We don't want these contracts to be 30 pages. So if it's less than 5% of transactions, do we really need it in there?
And somebody mentioned it earlier, there are shifts in the market, like the things that happened in the pandemic are probably not happening again. And, prayers going up.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're not having another situation like that. And so something that became a 6 or 7% rule during the pandemic is now back to 0.5, right? And it doesn't matter that much. I'm not saying that's this. I'm just saying if it doesn't matter to the general populace, then it's it may not, it's not our highest priority.
Sure. I would say that with market shifts, I saw the backup contract, used. So it, in my opinion, is more than 5%. It's not pandemic connected alone. May I suggest to the chair that what I submitted to you all, to our committee, be distributed for the committee to look at if we have a discussion while we're looking at some of the other comments?
Absolutely. I think that'd be good for everybody to see, and then we'll develop more when we meet. We have a new member, so Chrissy's joined us to join.
And Scott Kestner wants to observe when we meet.
Great.
I
think what he's understood.
So at the next meeting?
At the next.
Now, if there is the consideration of there might be contract change in February of next year, and if we're considering other things, the thought would just be, are there enough changes that it would take longer, or should it be submitted along with the changes in November, if indeed that happens?
My suggestion would be that since this is a working group, that I think we've got the cart before the horse, and y'all haven't even met, and you've got a new member. So my suggestion would be y'all have a meeting, and because there may be some things that get adjusted in that meeting. So I don't really think we want to spend time looking at something that hasn't really.
Yeah, if anybody has an interest in seeing it, we absolutely can share it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've discussed it for the last 2 meetings, but as John said, the opinions seem to be different. Well, no, we actually have.
Hold on, let her finish. What's that? I didn't hear the end. I'm sorry. Of your last comment, I
forgot what I was saying.
Okay. All right. So we'll do one more comment, then we'll move on.
Well, I was just going to suggest, and I don't want to be on that subcommittee, just saying. But I would say there's the seller's notice to buyer of removal of contingency under the addendum for the backup contract. That is where it talks about the effective date of the contract is amended to blank.
Yes.
And so that's where that amended effective date comes from. And so maybe that form needs to be done in conjunction with all the things that
Now, that's not a trust form. That's a TR.
Oh,
yeah.
Dang it. You're right.
It's not that backup.
But
Okay.
maybe that form should be also included in a broker. I knew I'd say it at least twice. The lawyers can't see that form.
Right.
So, but maybe that'd be a good idea for you to include that, or have one of your friends included in the packet that goes to your working group, and then it's distributed around.
I agree. And thank you, because I was just like, no, there's a form, but you're right. It's not a TREC form. So.
All right. So
thank you for bringing me back.
We'll move on from the backup addendum. Separate comment for the next.
Yeah. In talking about the things that we do in the 5% rule and all that, just a reminder to the new brokers, especially because we're all also realtors. And so we tend to think of all license holders as realtors. I think it's very important on this committee that we remember that there are people using the forms that not only aren't realtors that have the extra tools that we have, but there also are just consumers that are not licensed that are using these forms. And I think it's important that we keep that top of mind when we're making decisions.
Yeah. We're a consumer protection agency.
Smart. Yeah, I get it.
And there's some great case law that we'll go over at the end. It has some quotes about clarity in contracts, and it's real good to read what we're charged with to bring clarity and consistency and reduce disputes basically in the market area. So as we have, I'd like to introduce yourself to everybody. Sorry.
Sure, I'm Chelsea Buckholz, Executive Director. I am sometimes here and often not, and I'll probably just kind of blow in and out today, if that's okay, but it's good to see some of these familiar faces. Melissa, welcome. Thanks. Y'all doing okay?
Yeah. Thank you. All right, appreciate it. We do not have Jason yet. So let's see, we'll move on to the next working group, the new home contracts, which looks like we deferred last meeting again. Do we have anything from the new home contracts committee?
I don't think so. I don't think we've met either on that one because of the legislative matters. So we probably need to get that group together as well.
And who is on that group?
I don't remember. I'm the one that suggested a review of the new home contracts.
De facto member there.
I'm probably on it, but I don't remember.
There was a committee that was just you.
I had one where it's just me on it. And then everybody's like, no, we need more. I thought in my own head.
I think it should just be me and a title lawyer.
No. Would you like to join your committee?
Happens here, Brian. I think that's you.
Right up your alley.
Sure.
All right, so we have one member for you. All right. So the next one we have is, I guess, the recent legislation group or subgroup, which I don't think there's any new updates from our last meeting.
Well, other than we gave our report in that the legislature is in session right now.
Hey, SJ, I know that they did that. They're having part of the special session on that ownership stuff north of Fort Worth or north of
Colony.
Houston, the Colony.
Colony Ridge, yes, that's what I was.
Are they,
Colony
have you heard any
Ridge.
scuttlebutt as to whether they're gonna expand that to the foreign ownership?
I did not read all the comments, but Mono D. Ayala, who is District 131, I believe, in Houston, who is a real estate litigator, put out a press release today and made some statements, and I know he's on that. That is a big focus. It's Liberty County right outside of Houston that we're Colony Ridge.
Can you tee this up for some that may not be familiar with what you're discussing?
Okay, so Colony Ridge is a development that was opened by Trey Harris and his brother. And the bottom line is, and he interviewed yesterday and I listened to this, so out of his own mouth on Michael Berry, but also as a fact, they have sold much of their development to illegal aliens, non-documented, and some foreign entities who are then maybe leasing or whatever, letting anybody come in and live there. And so it has turned into a huge concern, and the state has declared, the governor's declared it, and I don't know if it's a full-on emergency, but has assigned additional state troopers and whatnot down to give more law enforcement because they believe that the Mexican cartels are running human trafficking and drugs and whatever. It's just really gotten to be bad.
And is there legislation that they're proposing as part of this?
I haven't seen anything actually proposed, but there are meetings on it going on. I didn't read anything yesterday, and I should have before that. But SJ, I personally expect that there will be some legislation coming out of this session.
And my question was, in addition to that, is it going to be expanded to the general foreign
I don't
ownership
know.
issue?
I think we would tell the legislature a good idea, just like we talk about here, is don't make 5% rules because that's dumb. But I don't know. I intend to go check in on Mono and the group on my way home today, but I don't know. I do expect that they're going to do something because it's really, this couldn't happen if these were all, U.S. owners, but this is teeing up, and really highlighting the issue with foreign owners who are, I don't know, what does it really make it different that they're not under our control? But nobody can find out, and nobody knows who owns this stuff, and nobody knows who's really in charge of those properties, and it's apparently the wild, wild west.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right. We'll move on to the next working group, which is a farm and ranch. Do we want to take up the farm and ranch when we go through the comments and the changes in the farm and ranch contract instead of
The farm and ranch group has not met since the last time, so there's our official report. So I would say yes.
Okay.
Is there a need to sunset any of these committees or working groups? So, we usually do them, not that they're ongoing, they're more ad hoc.
Right.
Yeah.
And so is the farm and ranch, let me ask that.
We haven't published our changes yet, so no.
So I think
Right, we've been holding.
the condo contract one, I think, if it, to the extent it's still open, I think we can sunset.
Sunset
that
that one. Okay.
I'm not aware of any others that we have active.
Ron, are you trying to redo the farm and ranch group?
No, I was just,
No,
it was.
We haven't finished our.
No, I didn't want the group to think they should continue to do things if
Nothing to do.
Well, and this is a good time to ask about the status of this, because we're under sunset
Waiting on
review
water.
to a limited extent right now, correct?
Right, and that's gonna start, the active review it's on disclosures, not just seller's disclosure, but all of the contract form disclosures, and we've been having some back and forth with, it's just statutory disclosures, right, but we've been, having back and forth with Ron and John on this, but just to let you all know, that review actually won't start until July. It had been slated for fall, but it's gonna move to July, so.
And as was mentioned, it's about all the disclosures in the contract. And so it's pretty broad, and they've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes. Ron had a very good paper that he pulled up to add to
When I had hair, I think.
But there's a whole lot of work going on behind the scenes to get ready for this review that's coming in. The Sunset Commission, if you're not familiar with it, reviews all the agencies in Texas to see if they still should continue or they should be sunsetted. We went through a sunset review, Trek did as a whole. That's 3 years ago now, 4 years ago.
Longer than that.
2019?
Yeah.
And time's going by fast. So this is a limited review. It's not a whole Trek. It's just over the disclosure part of it.
And I think that document, once it's, finalized and done, will be a really valuable tool to tie back. Hey, this is why we have this, and this.
Exactly. So Ron's largely our institutional knowledge now, going back as we ever need anything. 20 years. He's probably has the best memory on the committee here.
I found stuff from 1990 on the recovery fund, by the way, if you're interested. It looked different.
Okay, so we'll move on to agenda item number 4, discussion and possible action regarding deferred comments and recommendations from committee members concerning possible changes to contract forms, including review of draft new forms requested by the committee. And so if we go into our materials, I think the easiest way to do this may be just to walk through the contracts as they're presented here. So we're starting on page 4, the unapproved property contract. And I forgot who headed the discussion last meeting, but there's first change we have is in paragraph 3 with the addition of subsection D. The request here was to add the sales price adjustment based upon the acreage that is currently contained in the farm and ranch contract to the unapproved property contract. The language was discussed at the last meeting, is presented here. And so I'll tee this up first. If anybody reading that paragraph saw anything that needs to be changed or has any particular concern about the language. I wasn't here in person the last meeting. My concern, I just want to tee back up as we're discussing this, is I believe this may start to cause confusion with lot and block properties. And when we have, because this is used largely not just in acreage properties, but lot and block. There's nothing that really discusses that. It just has the acreage adjustment in there, will or will not be adjusted. So that's likely an education issue for sure, but that's my only concern, is causing some confusion over that. Otherwise, I like it being in it.
Isn't it true that most people in a lot and block, first of all, they're mostly much smaller, generally speaking, and they're usually not having a new survey, or they're usually not going to have a price adjustment based on acreage. And the price adjustment, if anything, in that situation, it's usually the square footage of the improvement, not the.
That's how it normally is, but there's a lot of transactions out there with either large lots that are lot and block. Some of these surveys even there have the acreage calculation on there, or square footage calculation of the lot. My concern is it to be used, somebody seeing a new tool and trying to use it for those type of transactions. Again, it may be the 5%, but I can see somebody picking this up and saying, I'm going to check this box, and then get themselves into a
Yeah,
So
keep
more than consumer
keep in mind that a plat is a survey, right? It defines the boundaries of the property, and they typically already have the acreage. So I don't think it's going to really come into play on subdivided property.
Yeah, well, for subdivided property, I could see them do it on a square foot basis. It doesn't seem to work for an acreage basis generally. Right, unless you're talking about a farmette type subdivision.
Our Huntsville office, for example, was a probably a 10,000 square foot lot, but it wasn't done by square feet. It was a meets and bounds description from an old neighborhood. And it had the acreage right there in the middle. I forgot what the acreage was.
Right.
And that differed from the prior survey. We got a new survey.
Right.
And so that's an example that would be a transaction where theoretically you could use this language because it
Correct.
does have the acreage on the survey itself. And real quick, your comment of a plat being a survey. It is, but is that, this is. an issue that-
I'm just saying, as a practical matter, you're gonna know what the acreage is, of a subdivided lot.
But if you've been
in most
assigned a
cases.
lot and block number, it's been plotted.
Mhm.
So, I just
John,
don't.
my only two comments is more form than content.
Mhm.
Well, maybe it is kind of content. The third line down, the acreage set forth in the survey seemed like old choice of words and wondered if stated in the survey or some other word rather than set forth, just for consideration. And then 2 lines down, there is a line for $1 per acre. And I suggest to be consistent, as we have in other places in the contracts, a $sign be put there so it's clear that it's intended to be a dollar amount. And I noticed in the farm and ranch contract where I made reference to it right away, there's no $sign there either. So when we get to that.
Okay. And this is a great consistency thing of being consistent throughout. That's good comment. So I think definitely the $sign. I don't think that's a question there to add that. How does everybody feel about the language, the acreage set forth in the survey? Taking out words, acreage stated in the survey, I think is fine too. That removes some word. I like updating it.
And just to clarify, this has been copied and pasted from the farm and ranch contract, so any change made to this language.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, we just changed this in the farm and ranch contract because that's part of what we did on our.
Right.
So this, not that means you can't change, I think that's fine if we wanted to set stated, but that this has been updated recently because we, tweaked how that was done. So just as a reminder.
Okay. So we'll change.
Well, sometimes the square footage and the acreage right in the survey is not stated. Now, if it's got a meets and bounds, it's stated, but if it's, as Brian pointed out, if it's just a plat, then it's not going to be stated, right?
Well, in that case, it wouldn't be adjusting it. to
And
begin with,
setting
right?
forth allows you to calculate it. I know it's a fine difference. If it's 100 by 50.
I'm not sad
I
about
think
set
that's-
forth. I think people.
I
like
think
set
that's the
forth.
98%. I think maybe higher.
So, I mean, I just like the broader language, frankly.
This works
Um,
with the $sign.
And then I guess maybe, I don't know, Ron, if this is where you were going earlier, but the difference to me in this contract in the farm and ranch is that there would be times where the price is a per square foot price as
Yeah.
opposed to acre. So do we need to
Have a checkbox.
reflect that in there, that it could be either by acreage or by square feet?
Yeah.
You can always calculate acres for acres.
And just-
So why make it hard?
My-
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's one of the few
clarity.
things we learned through licensing. Best practice.
Yeah.
Well, and if we added a square footage part to this, it would concern me in the farm and ranch when there's actual buildings on the property. Because then if you have the square footage of the building, are we getting into different language that's adjusting it? Because this
Well, I
isn't
actually-
approved, but the.
Right, I actually wouldn't put it in the farm and ranch. I would just do
Yeah.
it that way.
Just this one.
Just a,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know how you
I
would do
think it's a
it,
good idea.
but I do think it would be more likely in this contract that you might be on a per square foot basis.
I think if we put the square foot option in there, we might be more apt to have agents trying to use this paragraph on something that was, like 2/10 of an acre, some lot and block thing. I kind of want to discourage from that rather than encourage.
Okay, let me
I would
ask a
agree with that
clarifying
comment.
question.
Yes,
Y'all have jumped in the pack. You are talking about the 1 to 4 right now.
correct. No, the unapproved.
Okay. There's no improvements on an unimproved. So we wouldn't be talking about, when I mentioned the improvements, I'm talking about, the changes we would make consistently throughout all of our contracts and getting to the ones where there would be an improvement. But on the unimproved, there obviously as a matter of on its face, there are no improvements.
Right. My concern was making a global change to contracts that did contain improvements.
Yes.
And so if we did the
But
square
we're not
footage,
talking
having
about
it
the
here.
unimproved.
But aren't we talking
This-
about the
Diane,
square
Diane.
footage, aren't we talking about the square footage of a lot? If it's a
We are.
100 by 50? So if there's not acreage in a lot and you're in West U in Houston and you're selling a lot that isn't acreage, it's square footage.
Right.
So to that point, it made sense to me that there'd be acreage / square footage.
But if they're not buying it by the foot, I mean, I don't want to encourage them to use this paragraph when they don't need
In the
to.
subdivision.
John, I think we're having mission creep here.
Yeah.
You know,
Everybody-
this was
mission creep.
appropriate for the farm and ranch, and somebody said, hey, let's put it on the unimproved too. And that's a good change. But I don't think we need to go any further than that.
And I was about to also add to that, it may also be that if you were doing per square foot, that's probably going to be a commercial transaction where hopefully your lawyer is doing the language for you. So
That's true.
That's
Right.
but yeah.
Well,
Just the dirt.
Unless you're trying to buy a vacant lot in Austin these days.
Yeah.
So there's the square footage that the realtors use in the commercial contract forms. And so they have the choice there.
Too many boxes.
Yeah, I like
That's a lot of boxes.
I like what we have here set forth with the dollar sign.
Well, and it's,
Yes.
it's one where we can push it out for comment, and then if it ever makes it into the board, see the feedback we get back and make the adjustment at that time.
Set forth. I like set forth.
Yes, Jay?
Well, I wanted to make that exact point that one, since we've already published, in the farm and ranch, consistency is a very high rule, I think, in our drafting. And I do think there's some old school legal construction that lives with set forth, that doesn't live with stated. So I would say it would take a strong act to move it to stated, and especially.
Well, I think I hear the consensus of adding the dollar sign, leaving the set forth as is, and rolling with this.
Yes.
Okay. Any other changes before we move on?
Yes, just, this is just a very little minor thing, but if we're gonna do it, if staff could close that gap in 4B after the second box. There's just a bunch of spaces.
Seller is,
Somebody
is not.
OCD is.
Yeah.
They'll use it like special divisions. Can you close that up?
Yeah.
There you go.
How long can we talk about geothermal?
We're done.
I like it.
Meeting.
I like it
All
too.
right, so we can move on from, I don't think we need to talk about geothermal. We added that the last
Well,
meeting.
there is something to add to geothermal. You're gonna start seeing title companies taking exception to geothermal as well. So 6A9.
Why?
The exception or exclusion regarding minerals or geothermal approved by PDI.
What?
Is geothermal on the,
You want to add that to 6A9 is what you're saying?
I'm
Or
sorry?
You want to add that to 6A9 or what do
I'm
you?
just saying that the general mineral exception, some title companies are expanding it to include geothermal.
Is it going to be in the same exception
But it's,
or is it a different exception?
It may be a different one. It may be incorporated into it. I think it's going to be a different one.
Okay, because if it were going to be.
And
in
it's
the
not
same
yet
one-
been, it's in the statute, but it's not yet promulgated by Texas Department of
What
Interior.
I
statute?
think we may
The
wait.
new geothermal statute
so they are,
that defines who owns the
The
geothermal.
geothermal statute said that the Texas Department of Insurance is gonna change the underwriting.
It says title companies can add an exception for that. And the anticipation is that there's going to be a change in the procedural rules to encompass that.
to make it the standard. Make
Well,
the
I'd say
impression.
we
Okay.
wait, especially since we're not publishing
But
this.
good to have on the radar.
The heads up.
Just wanted to put on the radar.
Thanks for that, Brian. Yeah.
But nonetheless, we'll, in 4B, even if they change it, it's good to know if it's there, right?
And while, yeah, and while we're at it, on paragraph 6C1, the survey affidavit, TLTA is proposed proposing to the Department of Insurance that we not require that survey affidavit to be sworn to.
Where?
That
Who is suggesting that?
Then it's not an
Texas Land
affidavit.
Title
is it? Then it's not an affidavit, is it?
No, it's going to be an affidavit or a
The
declaration.
declaration.
Okay. And-
Which we may then need to change this
So
language.
we may need to
Take out
change the
notary.
language here, which I think everybody will really like.
And that is
Right.
just when several years ago, a declaration, an unsworn declaration became legal
Right,
for all purposes.
right. And we're asking
Okay.
Texas Department of Insurance to expand that form so we can use that, so that agents don't have to
Well, are they
go
changing?
find a
Yeah,
notary.
it's used a lot in the courts.
Affidavit / unsworn declaration then?
Yeah, that's what, yeah,
But
it's being discussed.
It's being discussed. It's probably gonna happen probably in the first half.
Okay,
Of
so we're
next
still
year.
heads up in.
So that's a heads up.
Okay.
Interesting.
So the next change we have is the no survey option. This is on page 5 of the materials.
I don't like this.
And so there's a long,
5%, does it?
Not, yeah.
I think it does.
Yeah.
This comes up a lot.
I don't get it.
And it's been controversial. This has been around for a long time, this discussion, whether to have this box or not, right? And so we look at the two sides as we're a consumer protection agency, right? And we've always shifted to the side of if anybody's getting a loan, they're gonna have to get one anyways. And if not, they really should get a survey. But I think in practice, we have a lot of agents writing in special provisions, no survey. And there's a lot of issues that come out of that, like we discussed a couple meetings ago or last meeting. What happens to your ability to object under 6D? And so this language was developed and that we have in here. I have a suggestion to the grammar of it, but not the content. I think I came around now to thinking it's good to have in the contract itself. I think it as worded right now with so many ends there at the end, just sounds funny. So I would suggest changing this up to read, no survey is required and buyer waives any right contained in paragraph 6D to object to matters disclosed in any survey. Instead of saying buyer waives any right to object to matters disclosed in any survey in paragraph 6D.
Don't even need in paragraph 6D. I just say no survey is required, period. Buyer waives any rights to object to matters disclosed in any survey, period.
Yeah, we can do that and not even reference 6D.
Did you guys talk about in previous meetings the issue that agents are gonna run into when they check the box and then later there's a lender that requires a new survey?
We briefly
Is that
did in
buyer
terms of the
expense or-
objection, but if you can expand for everybody.
I mean, it's gonna put a huge burden on brokers to teach their agents about when that's appropriate to use and when it's not appropriate to use, because they're gonna see it merely as cost savings. And 3/4 of the way into the transaction, the lender's gonna say, we want the T19, and you have to have a survey to issue it. They won't accept deletions. So then it's gonna blow up your deals with people arguing about timing to get it done, because they're not super fast, and who's gonna pay for it.
And the title world sees that all the time.
Let me
So
take-
when you get that closing table.
The reason
trying
why
to
I
fight
don't
through
like it is there's an easy fix. Now, it's educational in the matter. It's easy fix. You just check the box that requires the buyer to get the survey, and he doesn't. That's all that has to happen. If the buyer's going to waive anything, he just doesn't bother getting the survey. So it's educational. I don't need why we need to add it. It encourages, I think, confusion, and it encourages people not to get a survey, which I think is opposite what we want.
And it's really only a pure option in cash transactions.
Right.
I've got another comment down there here about that. Just as a obvious reminder, the lender is not a party to this contract.
Mhm.
You know, and the buyer, if they are getting financing, which sometimes they do, even after they say it's a cash transaction, okay, which that's part of why this came out, that's their problem with their lender. It is not the seller's problem. Okay, and people have the right to make this deal, and they are making this deal, and we were asked to address it.
And there is an issue out there. There's no doubt there's an issue, and I think it may rise above the 5%. My concern on the flip side, which has always been our concern, is it being abused or not needed right at the end. There's another way of doing it. And so I think we have to make that fundamental decision. Do we try to do a fix that will create more issues down the road? Or do we go ahead and
I'm sorry.
Good.
what happens in the contract if a buyer and a seller just leave C blank and they don't check 1 and they don't check 2 and they don't check 3 and there is no 4?
Yeah, so that is done quite a bit as well.
Right. So buyer didn't want one from the seller, buyer didn't want to buy one, they just chose not to check any boxes. I mean, and a survey is obviously not required, it doesn't say, I don't know what, from the legal perspective, I don't
To
know.
address that real quick, I think the legal side that falls down into basically not having a survey. The buyer wants one or buyer's required to get one, they can, right? But they'll be the ones paying for it.
Well,
But
sure.
it does create some ambiguity in the contract of not being able to point to your buyer saying, this is who pays for it.
Yeah, or what you could do, you don't need paragraph 4. In C, and it says at the end, check 1 box only. You just say if no box is checked, no survey is required.
Yeah.
Unless required by the
Well,
lender or something. Do you add a tagline?
The lender's not part of this.
So I have a comment or question off of what you said. I would agree with you that you could just check 2 and then if the buyer wants to get one, they can.
Right.
But I would feel more comfortable with that being the position if it said buyer may obtain a new survey. And then it's at their expense, because to me, when the party is reading it and it says shall, they're like, oh, I have to. But if it's really just their option and they do it at their expense if they need one or want one, that seems to make that fit better with your.
I like that.
I like
actually
that.
like
I
that.
really like that. Just
Because
You are so smart.
no 4,
it takes 2.
get rid of 4,
Yeah.
use number 2 and change it to may. I like that.
I like that too.
I like that.
That's
I like
awesome.
that best.
Good
Score
job.
1 for Amy. Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm leaving my mark, SJ. I'm leaving
Okay,
my.
so just to
Forever will
clarify, and
remember.
I love that, but just to clarify,
Oh,
they
before you-
still, in that situation, they still have to select the number of days. So within, I'm gonna call it
Yeah.
20 days, buyer may. So if they don't do it within 20 days, tough.
well, and that's important. They can still get it, but that starts their
They
deadline
don't
for
get to
the
object,
objections.
right. If
Exactly.
I wait 22 days to do it, I can have my survey all day long, but I've blown
Right,
my
objections.
objection date and tough on
Right,
me.
exactly.
Mhm.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So,
Good job.
So take out 4 and just put may into.
No, different issues.
I would take out
Well,
four.
I thought
well, I think take out
We're
4 is what
thinking take
everybody's
out
thinking
4.
about.
Yeah.
I want that 4, and don't forget,
Okay.
I mean, I know we have
That's
these
what I
people here,
heard.
but this was a whole issue that we spent a ton of time on at the last meeting, and it was asked for. That's a different situation. If I want to cut this off from the beginning, not wait 20 days on your your beautiful May situation, I want to know from the beginning, I'm not jacking around with the survey. It's too bad, no survey, that's my terms. And we agree to that up front, then we can just rock on, I don't have to wait 21 days.
yeah, and
I think
4
it's-
does provide for a waiver.
Yeah.
Buyer waives the right to make objections.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Exactly.
Well, I don't like it because 1, it discourages in transactions where we don't need to discourage a survey. And if the buyer has the option to get a survey, so what? The seller shouldn't compel the buyer not to get a survey.
You're right.
I
Who
know,
makes
but-
an offer?
I know, so why
Somebody
then,
makes an
so
offer.
why then have that if the buyer's result is the same under 6C2 by
It's
changing it
not
to
the
May?
same if there's any number of days other than 0.
She's
No,
talking about.
they
the
can put
objection.
0.
She's talking.
They could put
Right.
0, but who's gonna put 0? I mean, come on.
Right, but the result is the
Right.
same to the buyer. You give the buyer the option to get the survey or not get the
They
survey.
can still get the survey. Nobody stop, even if we do 4,
I know, but
nobody's
we
stopping the
shouldn't-
buyer from getting a
I-
survey. It just stops the seller
I
from
don't think
having
that's,
to worry about whatever drama they bring up.
I don't think that's part of our charge is to encourage that type of transaction.
We're not
I think our
encouraging
charge here
it.
would encourage the survey to get completed. If the buyer affirmatively decides that he doesn't want to, that's fine, but he always had the choice to get it all along.
You may recall that the whole reason this came up, which is one of our overarching issues, this is to discourage the unauthorized practice of law.
I know,
By
but this
brokers.
solves the problem.
Yeah, the one thing to circle us back around, this is highlighting the 2 sides, right? Of suggesting and pushing for consumer protection versus providing the option that a lot of people are doing. And this May approach, I think, actually bridged the gap in my mind to not making the full leap to number 4 and having that flexibility there for the buyer to have it or not. I think it's kind of it's a step in the right direction, and it's not all the way, but to me, it comforts me that it gives what we need, the flexibility there to not have it, and we can have education centered around May and how that impacts.
How have we gone all this time without paragraph 4? Somehow we muddled through. So,
Yes, but it's
I mean, it's
become
not
an
that
issue.
big of a deal. And adding May does make it optional for the buyer.
Yeah. Maybe we'll do a straw poll after a few more comments and see.
If one of the concerns is the waiving of the rights, maybe that gets added to paragraph C2 somewhere. If no survey is obtained, then the buyer waives the rights. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud that if the waiving of the rights is a concern, maybe we just move it up.
Well, you don't have a right to object if you don't have a survey. So
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think John is saying that, Ron is saying that by it being in there gives the impression that we're encouraging the not getting a survey. And the reason that buyers will not get one is to save money. And cash oftentimes don't get surveys. So, you're both bringing up very good points for us to
That's what
consider.
Latro mentioned earlier.
I think when you're trying to cover the whole group of agents that are out there, you've got really strong, really educated ones that are going to understand the impact. And then you've got 95% of the other ones that are going to say, ooh, this will make our offer stronger. Let's just check this box. And then there's so much liability that falls on the agents because of
Yeah.
the relationship with the customer.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Actually, never mind. After I was gonna say something, but I kind of went.
You're thinking about people in your group where you're like, oh, they're checking that box.
So
Well, and I'm thinking that we're a consumer protection agency, right? And if a consumer who's not represented is like, oh, I don't need a survey because they don't
Thank
even
you.
know.
Thank you.
And then then they check it and then they got all kinds of wonky drama and they don't have anybody guiding them through it except for the title company or the attorney or whatever. And I don't know. I can see where it can become problematic for someone not represented.
So I think we're all on board for the May change, regardless of what we do with paragraph 4. So we do that change. I would like to take a straw poll now to see who wants, with the change from Shell to May, who still wants a paragraph 4 no survey option. If you want it, raise your hand.
You asked 2 questions there.
Yeah. So if you want a
May
paragraph 4.
and number 4.
No, I think assuming number 4 is done, or May is done,
Okay.
do you want a number 4 or not? And we have SJ as yes.
I kind of see some validity to it. The wording may not.
The lion
Are you just gonna
is
throw her a
laying down
bone?
with the lamb.
All right, so we got,
I'm kind of on it too. I'm not happy with the wording, but I think the principle is important.
so
There's, and let me just support the comments down here. My comment. This issue came to us through comments. This wasn't just us sitting around bored. This came to us, and I'm looking back and their broker comments on this.
well, there's no question there's comments out there in a request for it, and that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we've talked this one through as much as we can. So I think with the poll, maybe we go to the May, taking out paragraph 4. And then for those that would like paragraph 4, maybe see if there's any tweaks you want to make to bring it back to the next meeting, because we're not pushing this through, right? So we can think about that more, but looks like the committee as a whole would like to move forward without number 4 right now.
Yes.
Mhm.
So we'll talk about that again next meeting. All right, so the next change we have is it's on page 7 of the materials. And this is to the required notices paragraph. And I'm not sure there's any, this language was discussed last time. I guess, I don't know if we need to go through it again, other than ask if anybody has any additional new comments or any grammatical suggestions to this.
I have a tiny grammatical. I think there's an extra space after the first comma, space, utility. It might not be, but if there is, take it out.
So where were you saying?
Right after example?
Yes,
I think they're all the
correct.
same.
I can't tell if there's an extra space.
Yeah, I think a lot of these formatting things will be done at the very end, right?
Yeah.
And it may be because it's blue and highlighted that it looks.
I think these are good changes because we were asking for the mud form to be put in and the PID form, and then they had to do it in two places, going back to paragraph 22. And so I think this is good. Good decision.
I feel like it was your baby in the first place.
Oh, it was?
Yeah.
Oh.
That's why I'm like, oh.
Good job.
I totally forgot that. I didn't remember. Gee, this is great.
Yeah, I tell you.
I'll just tell you, this is the one I hear the most about.
Yeah, I think so too. But I'm curious why it even went in there the way it did the first time with the mud and the WCID and the PID notices, because it didn't talk about the buyer's remedies. And it was just weird because we were writing it in here, and then like you said, we were checking it at the end, and then we're attaching the form. Why do we have to mention it so many times? And then there was another place where we were checking, yes, you were in the, it just seemed very cumbersome to me to begin with, and I'm just wondering why we even started with it, because I wasn't here, so.
Well, one of the mandates that we have as a not only consumer protection agency, I mean, that's true, but not 100% true.
Sure.
But one of our tenets is that we don't go make up stuff.
Right.
You know, that unless there's a reason, but the legislature is one of our number one drivers.
Well,
if
sure.
the legislature says something, you know, makes a new law, we have to incorporate.
Right.
So Frankenstein over, we've been on this committee for 14 years.
Right.
And it didn't look like this. This is at least 2 changes in our term. So as things have been added, it made all the sense when it was mud. Everybody knew what a mud was. And it was only the muds. But then over time,
sure, yeah,
PID
because I'm
was
seeing the
recent,
contract.
so we've added that in, and then it's become, okay, well, now there's more things. So this last change, proposed change, is to, and also one of our tenets is to try to make things as consumer friendly, regular words as much as possible. So we broadened it into sort of general, because obviously the legislature's not finished. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
and to step back from that a little bit too, so paragraph 7 or 6 is the paragraph that lists all the required title notices, right? And so when they came out with these new ones, public improvement district, when it has these really substantial rights of termination tied to it.
Right.
You know, the MUD, if you don't provide it before you enter the contract or add it, you have an out all the way through closing. Under the PID, you have an out 7 days after the notice is actually delivered. So it doesn't go all the way through closing, but it's a substantial option like termination right, where you wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you can terminate.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that they were provided, because with especially the PIDs going into areas where there's not MUDs and other ones, these agents need to be reminded, we thought, that there's other notices you may need to provide.
Well, not
And this
just
was a way to
agents.
list it.
Also, let's just say you had 2 pro se.
Yeah, or consumers, buyers or so.
They don't know.
And we had a long debate on whether to list it just in paragraph 12 or paragraph 12 and 22
Right.
on some of the notices. And we actually said, we're going to put it in there and vote and see how it works.
Okay,
we
because
couldn't
that
make a
was what I
decision
was
at the
getting at
time.
is, well, it's over here, and then we got to do it over here, and.
Because it's an addendum, right? So we normally do addendums in paragraph 22. And are these notices or are they addendums? And so that's kind of the debate that we had at the time.
Okay,
on
that makes sense.
what to
That's
do.
why I was asking. I was like, I just don't know how it ended up there to start with. I like the change though, that you put in there about the rights to terminate. Or whatever, remedies and rights to terminate, yeah. Okay.
All right, so we'll
Thank
move on from that. Looks like our next change, it's all for the unapproved contract. 1 to 4 on page 14 of our materials is the same geothermal change. We have the survey change as well, which will do to mirror what we did in the unapproved. Then we have a different change for the certificate of mold remediation. I don't think this changed during our last meeting, right? So I'm not sure if there's any new comments on this. This is a change that has been in there a couple meetings ago.
I thought there was something in our.
In the last meeting, it was in the unapproved contract, so that has been taken out.
Right.
That was.
Wow, which totally makes sense.
Those meeting minutes, you know, if you read them, sometimes they're helpful.
They are. And re-reviewing the videos online, so everybody knows these videos were broadcast live and then they're put on YouTube. And so it's out there, you can go back and review it at any time. So getting ready for meetings or particular topics, you can go back and generally I make some table of contents for them. So if you ever want to say, hey, when was this discussed? You can go back and I can send you to it.
That's cool.
Or ask Ron.
Yeah, Ron knows on top of it.
Can we get them off YouTube?
I was gonna say that.
They didn't
The
used to be
main point
recorded.
there is be careful what you say.
John, you might, actually was making some notes, and since you brought it up, you might, especially since we have some new people, just talk about open meetings.
Yes, okay, so in open meetings, we cannot discuss committee business outside of having an active, or what's the term, being in a meeting. We don't want to create walking quorum. So if we ever see each other in social places or outside, we want to avoid talking business to have the walking quorum. But we are Open Meetings Act, so we have to be open to the public. That's why they're now recorded. Any public members here to attend, and we have our one guest here, Fabian Saldana, but I'm amazed more people don't come to these. And when I teach, I try to encourage people to come or at least listen. They don't geek out like us on these.
Could I ask for clarification?
Yes.
If just two committee members are talking about something, is that regulated?
So-
Go ahead.
Oh, so you have to have like over the course of several conversations, if a quorum talks about the same thing, like
A quorum of the whole committee.
Yeah.
Being a walking
Then
quorum.
that's called a walking quorum. So the way to avoid that is to simply not talk about business, because you don't really know who else would be talking about the same subject. And so you can't totally control a walking quorum.
Got it.
So best to avoid
So it's just common
the
sense.
business of the.
If you and I knew that if you, no matter what, you're not talking to anyone else about something, and I knew and you were confident, we could talk about it.
Well,
But she's right, just, we don't know, I don't know who you're also brought it up to, and you don't know who else I've also brought it up to, so just leave it alone and just don't talk about it.
Because what
Or
if
who
two
else
other
had the idea
people
independently?
unconnected to you have similar,
Right.
talk about a similar topic? Well, then you don't know about that, and you certainly can't control it. So best practice, just don't talk business.
And this applies to subcommittee meetings as well, right?
That's why
what-
subcommittee meetings aren't a
There's special
majority.
exception.
You won't have a quorum at the subcommittee.
And the subcommittee can't take action. I was gonna say, the Trek broker lawyer group has also had a rule on top of open meetings that we will not talk business at all, other than if you're assigned a subcommittee and your purpose is to then come and bring a report to the full committee, but
Makes meeting for dinner more enjoyable.
it does.
So, but I guess I was just saying, his answer is, the government code is not, best practice is better, but it's not quite as hard.
Right,
Don't say that word.
Our deal is,
That's an understanding.
our committee's best practice is better than
Sure.
the state's.
So is it appropriate timing to ask a couple clarifying questions on the 1 to 4? Or is that not the appropriate time?
Yes, and actually we're on that one. So yes,
Okay.
go ahead.
Something that comes up quite a number of times is 7E on lender required repairs and how it relates to 2B of the TPF on conventional loans where you have to give the 3-day notice. And that includes lender required repairs for not receiving property approval, which takes precedence because 7E says that if parties don't agree on who's going to pay, then they can terminate. But then you have addendums, the TPF with 2B on property approval that says that if it doesn't meet property approval, which includes lender required repairs, does the buyer still get out potentially regardless for lender required repairs, even if they don't give the 3-day notice required by the TPF on conventional loans? Just clarifying question because it comes up quite a bit on which.
Okay, so let me give an example. So you have a buyer whose lender says you have to make the following repairs or else I'm not going to give property approval. And the seller says, well, I'm not paying.
Well, with the seller,
And the buyer says, well, I'm not paying, and 7E says I don't have to pay.
And I'd like, I haven't had that come to me like that, or haven't addressed that in my practice, but I think it's an interesting question and concern. And I think you have to treat them different.
no, well, going a little bit further on the example is, it is
And it comes up 2 days
closing
before
day.
closing.
No, it's closing day or 2 days before closing. And they're saying we have lender required repairs. Don't have the appraisal back to say what they are, but they said the underwriter says there's going to be. So we're getting out of the contract. The seller hasn't said yes or no because there's no list to even determine money. So they're saying we get out because of 7E, but they didn't give a 3-day notice per the lender and it's conventional loan. So which takes precedence because it's not clear, in my opinion.
And 7E
and it
has
comes
no
up quite a
requirement,
bit.
no
Yeah,
time
7E
requirement.
doesn't have time requirements.
It doesn't, however, you're missing the point that
Third-party financing.
there was the third-party financing piece and the seller was never given the option. It had nothing to do with the money portion because there was no list of repairs set forth yet.
This is a seller financing?
No, I'm sorry. The seller was never given the opportunity to say yes or no to the lender required repairs because they didn't know what the repairs were because the appraiser didn't say anything yet because the appraisal wasn't even done. But the buyer tries to get out of the contract. There's a loophole there that is present in my
Well,
opinion.
There's separate rights, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it's separate
Very
rights.
0.5%.
Yeah, I think it's definitely probably that 5% bucket. It is a very interesting situation to look at it from that perspective. I think generally these are standalone provisions. I don't think one overrides the other. So I think there's 2 different rights. And so if you miss the 3 days at the end for the third-party financing, you're out. But you still might have this, but that situation where you don't have the actual cost.
I think that the controlling is 7B2. Buyer accepts the property in as-is condition, except seller agrees to do the following.
Right.
And until seller agrees to do something, it's an as-is deal.
But the seller can't agree if they don't have the list, but
They
the
don't
buyer
have to
still
agree.
uses it. The buyer still uses it to get out.
I think what
How
her
does the
point-
buyer get out?
they were
Yeah,
just
her
looking for a
point is
reason
that
anyway.
the seller might have wanted to offer to make the repairs to save the deal, I guess. Is that kind of what you're saying?
The seller,
Because the seller
They just
didn't
never
ever
had an option.
know, but if they had known, they might have offered to go ahead and pay for it, even though they didn't offer to do it at the beginning.
I think that definitely happens, but it's less than 5%.
Way less.
And if it happens immediately before closing, that's on the buyer. I mean, the whole reason we put that 3-day provision in
Way back
for
when.
property approval is we didn't want to have those surprises on the day of closing. And so we said, buyer, it's your lender, you're the best person to control how your lender reacts to whether there's property approval. Get on the stick and make sure that they do it sooner rather than later.
But he's got to submit the lender's written determination. So in the example that you gave, they haven't made a determination yet. You're just hearing stuff.
And the
So
point is, that's the buyer's fault.
exactly. So
Yeah.
he would be in
but the buyer won't
default.
release earnest money.
Well, okay, so here's the situation, right? So if he gives he's got to give that notice from the lender. If you can't get the right thing in writing from the lender, he's going to be in default. Buyer will be.
Well, in
Now-
her situation has an added element of there's a list of repairs, but no cost associated with
There
it.
was no list. They
Oh, no
said
list.
No list.
they
She
wanted
didn't
the
have a
seller
list.
to
Now-
agree to lender required repairs. And it's like, okay, what repairs?
Well, then I
We
don't think
know
they
yet.
can use paragraph 7.
And that's what they use.
Right.
Yeah.
Is
Now,
paragraph
there is
7A.
a deadline.
Things. One, I would also just on a general note that this committee does not give advisory opinions.
Right.
Okay, so if anybody out there is listening, this is not an advisory opinion either of this committee or any of the individual attorneys who are licensed here, because it would be malpractice to give advice based on somebody just telling you what the issue is without reviewing the documents, and that's not what this committee is about. But
By necessity, we have to
you know,
discuss through it in the legal
That's right.
implications of
That's
it.
right.
But
But
that is a good
the
point to make for
answer
each and every
that
one.
all of us would say is that there is a provision in every one of these contracts that says you should consult a lawyer. And that's what should happen. And a second reminder to any who are brokers and any of the consumers out there, that a broker, one, asking for legal advice and passing it back is committing an act of practicing law without a license, because you're giving legal advice, even if you ask a lawyer. So, for all those things, the answer ultimately, if I was giving you advice, is your client needs to hire a lawyer who can review all the whole entire transaction and all the paperwork and give them very specific legal advice. And as a broker, the only thing you should even consider doing is saying, well, here's a list of multiple, more than one or two or three lawyers that we're aware of that practice.
We do, and I'm not
and then
disputing
stay out of
that.
it.
That's what we do. And I pretty much about 10 times a day say, go seek legal counsel. This is just discussion here. That's what we do.
Right.
But that's where I see so many issues, especially if we're talking about consumers using these forms. That is where people get into disputes over this here and that phrase over in the TPF, 2B. There's problems
Consumers who
there.
don't have agents helping them? Or you're saying
Consumers that
one-
don't have agents helping them.
So you've got an agent on one side and they don't have an agent on the other.
No, there's two agents involved in that scenario, but
Well, I'll make one quick comment. We'll go to Brian, and then I think Ron has one that we'll move on. Is 537.11 of the admin code is what provides that brokers cannot directly or indirectly provide or give legal advice. And so it's that indirect side of it as well. But
Okay, so here's the problem that I see. And that is in paragraph 2B of the third-party financing addendum, the buyer has to make a determination that they couldn't get property approval. And they have to do that at least 3 days before closing.
Right.
Okay, so let's say we're the day before closing and they didn't terminate it, but they say, but wait a second, but wait, 7E says if there are lender required repairs, if the parties do not agree to pay for the lender required repairs or treatments, this contract will terminate. And so I'm not terminating under the third party financing addendum. I'm terminating under paragraph 7E.
Now, that was where I was going. Okay, so I think it is worth possibly looking at 7E to say that if the lender required repairs cannot be reasonably completed by the closing date, which is required under 7F, then there can be a reasonable extension, just like we do for title issues and survey issues in paragraph 9. So I think that might be worth consideration in talking about the forms. I'm not suggesting we do it now, because I think this is going to involve a little more discussion in terms of it. And we're probably off agenda item anyway.
Yeah, and let's put that on the agenda for next week.
Okay.
To go through. I think that'd be
Good conversation.
One more thing, this could be future agenda item, especially for any consumer, but we've had, this is probably not 5% or more, so I'm gonna not spend much time on this, a definition of some sort of funding. Because there seems to be multiple definitions on what constitutes funding, because we have had agents and brokers refuse to release keys after a title company has said it is closed and funded. Because they said until the money is in the account,
Yeah, you get that from sellers. I don't want to release until I've seen my wire.
Right, they don't care if they know the wire's been issued until it hits the account. And we have clients whose insurance now covers the property because it's closed and funded, and we can't get, and I can't find anything to provide to those brokers or agents, and they will not give us possession of the property.
Are you talking about where the money's in escrow and not in the seller's hands?
Right.
Right,
They've got a funding number, it's been dispersed, they just haven't actually.
they don't have the
received it.
money.
Or maybe it's just disbursement.
Exactly.
Yes.
And
There you
agents,
go.
and agents.
So what's,
Yeah, and that happens a lot. I think that.
Yeah,
what's-
and just a
what is TDI?
definition.
That is
Define funding
education.
is?
We should refer that to the education.
When all
Yeah.
good funds are received and all the documents have been signed.
so that was my
Well, I don't know
recollection.
TDI, the actual definition, but
That was my recollection, was that the committee always looked to TDI's definition of funding.
Yeah.
It's when they show us in closing and funding. So when is funding in the title?
And
It's,
Don't
there's
you sign it?
there's no rule.
don't you sign a document at closing that says, I get it, I'm not getting my money right now? I'm gonna get my money
I mean,
later,
I
like
think-
there's a delay
I
in
think it's an
funding.
education.
No.
Then it's the
Not
educational
all-
piece,
not all
but
the
then
time.
what do we go back to another broker with and say, here you go, this is the documented reasoning why we want access to the property. And we want the
Education, whole letter.
Yes.
Correct,
Funding-
because
fund-
I can educate my 177 agents all day long, but when we have a broker and an agent and they're sitting there with the seller saying, we're not releasing your keys.
I didn't mean you education, I meant track education.
Yeah.
Let's add that to the next meeting as well. I'll look more into the funding, scope of the TDI regulations. See,
Well,
It
you're
may, it's
right.
probably just good funds received and stuff,
And it's received, my understanding is received by the title company, then it's funded, right?
Referring it to the education.
When the transaction is funded is when the title company has all
Track
documents
education.
and all money.
And all,
Okay.
and all conditions. to
You
close.
mean add it to track.
Responsibility or something like that.
Or it could go to the
Thank you.
broker's office.
Well,
Or legal one and two.
I mean, that's, and does the title company have to make an overt act
Are you on that?
to break escrow?
Yes.
Take it to-
So we'll.
You know, in the old days, we could do livery of season. Remember that? A lot of
Get back on our
Yep.
regular
beat the
agenda.
kid.
So now we're gonna
I don't
go back
remember.
to, all right,
I
so
think we're to page 53.
53. Okay,
Next change we have to talk about.
the Agriculture Foreign Investment Disclosure Act of 1978.
What page?
So this, I'm not sure there's anything,
53 of the material.
And we're skipping this far ahead, John, just to be clear, is because all of these same changes have been on the other.
Yeah,
That
this
is
is,
correct.
this is the first one we haven't talked about.
Where are we?
Today.
page 53.
The first set of changes we haven't talked about, right?
Yeah.
To various.
I still would like that.
John, on Farm and Ranch,
Every contract
on
taken out.
page 46, did you make a note about adding that dollar sign?
Yes, we made a note of that earlier. Mhm. We'll make that consistent.
Staff is awesome. We just say it and it happens.
Amen.
Any comments on the new disclosure language that was used last time? Grammatical, I read it, I thought it read good. We'll move on from that. The
Well,
next,
This came,
go ahead.
came from the requirement too, right? We didn't, I don't think we went
Well,
crazy.
This has been around since 1978, and it's just one that we decided to. The vintage. But we decided to add it to the contract, especially with it being more in the news now, right? And other potential requirements coming out.
Can I just ask a question with respect to this 20B? Are we getting into a little too much detail where we don't have flexibility if the law changes? You know, FSA 150, civil penalty up to 25%. Do we need to, do we achieve the purposes just by saying that the act requires the disclosure in accordance with the law, failure to comply may be subject to a civil penalty?
No.
I mean, you're getting into a lot of detail.
Why are you editing what the government says? I mean, that's what we've lifted it, right? And it's,
No, I think he's mentioning, for example, in A, we don't get into the penalties and the time limits. Right?
Yeah.
Specific.
We don't need to, I mean, yes, I think we need to say, you got to follow the act, consult a lawyer, but I'm not going to tell you what form number it is, how many days. civil penalty.
That's a good point.
Where would I find this one?
That's the first question they're gonna
In the
ask.
material.
That's what I would say.
That's why.
I would look at this form and go, where do I
and
find
that's
this form?
exactly one of the reasons why
It's on the
we
Google.
have put this in here. Maybe we need to add more to A, but
Yeah.
we put it in there because we're trying to help the people. And as we've said before, and we should say again, for the new people and just as a general purpose, especially of all the contracts, the farm and ranch is kind of a standalone sometimes. The people who actually practice specifically farm and ranch brokerage and a lot of consumers on their own will use this contract, and they won't be going and getting this addenda and that addenda, and even though they should, they're not always pulling in lawyers in the beginning. And so we tried to
So
make them aware, by putting, and we lifted this language, so I don't.
Where was it lifted from?
I think someone had submitted this
I
as,
think it's
as an
the
example.
executive summary.
It was in another contract, someone else's contract.
This was Robin one that suggested?
I think he did submit it, and I think it may, I want to say maybe a California contract, but it was just example language.
So
I mean,
really
I'm
all,
just saying, the first sentence is good. I don't think we need the second sentence. And the failure to report may be subject to civil penalties, period, and consult an attorney.
I like that change personally. I know SJ's on the other side. What does everybody else feel about this? Any
So
strong
say it again,
opinions?
what
Like
you want?
Brian's
Okay,
change.
keep the first sentence. You don't need the second sentence.
Which starts with foreign persons must file a FSA
Mhm.
153.
Because,
The farm
right,
where the land is physically located within 90 days.
Correct.
right. And
Why
then,
don't you want that?
Well, let him finish first.
and then, the next sentence would just be failure to report may be subject to civil penalty, period.
Okay,
May
now
subject-
that I understand that, why do you want to take out 2?
The second sentence?
Right,
Because I want to give flexibility. There is a disclosure obligation under the act. But I don't know, that rule might change.
well, and then we'll change our form when it does, just like we do when there's other legal changes.
like we
Yeah.
did in 1978.
Right, that's what I was. I was thinking the same.
I'm worried too much about this.
So let's go around the room for others. What do you think on?
I'm still not on board with adding it at all, so you should move to the next person.
Gotcha.
I'm good with, I don't have strong feelings. But I agree. I think that the specificity could cause us a problem if someone's not keeping. It's easy for us to keep up with our state legislative changes because it's our state. But whenever, I don't know who's going to keep up with this particular federal act. If we had to
Diane?
change.
Oh, you have a-
No, I'm comfortable with the form. I like the detail. I'd like to see more specifics in A, because that's the one that Asians deal with more, particularly in large cities. And the FERDA issue is not really clear. So I'd like to see them balanced and maybe improvement in A. I'm okay with B.
Okay,
Can we see guidance from the chair since we are?
sure. Let's go around the room real quick and then we'll come there. Tony?
Well, that was my comment.
Yeah, thank you.
I like the more detail, 'cause I think when you just state, hey, the Agricultural Foreign Investment Disclosure Act, most of the agents are like, I don't know what that is. I don't think that even has anything to do with it. Let's just keep on going through. If you give it a little bit more detail, they go, oh, wait a minute here, this might apply to us. Makes them think about it more.
Yeah.
And so I kind of like the more detail, although I'm really not that diehard. I like Brian's idea too, so I don't really have a big sway in it.
Okay. Mary?
I think it's confusing for the agents and I just don't like it. I think we'll have way too many questions.
With the detail or without the detail?
To be on, requires a foreign person who requires, deposes and holds interest. And I understand we're having challenges, with people selling wrong property and stuff. I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to get the FSA 153 and I don't think it would be my job to pull it off the Google and have them sign it.
No, absolutely it's not, no.
Your job
There's-
is to catch on to this and say, well, if I got a foreign person involved, you tell your buyer, seller, whatever, you got some stuff to go do. You should not be doing the legwork at all as a broker agent.
Yeah.
I like the detail personally. I think it stresses how important this is rather than it just being a blurb that people are just going to smooth right over. So I personally prefer the detail.
I went to the restroom and I am totally lost. I'm looking for where it's
We'll take a
written.
restroom break shortly too.
Page 53.
Thank you. I'm like scrolling and can't find it.
Whether the detail in the new disclosure or disclosure we put in there about the Agricultural Foreign Investment Act, Disclosure Act, whether to take out the second sentence that starts with foreign persons in part of the following sentence as well. Take out some of the detail while still putting the disclosure of the act in there.
Okay, let me read it.
I mean, I don't really have a strong opinion. It is a paragraph that agents are gonna blow right past because there's nothing to fill in or check a box or anything like
Yes,
that.
that's the most salient comment right there.
Yeah.
Mr. Kesner, you have any thoughts on this?
My only issue is I think they're gonna read A and they're gonna go to B and say, well, this is an agricultural land, so I'm exempt from A. They're not gonna link the two. They're gonna say, well, foreign person, but it's not agricultural, so I'm exempt.
No.
Well,
And I'm just, because, I mean, we deal with the foreign person in New Mexico with, I mean, 2 full pages. And I think, hey, if you're a foreign person, you're gonna pay, but they're gonna look at B and say, well, it's not agricultural, so am I exempt from that? And we're gonna do what SJ wants us to do, and we're gonna practice law all the time and give them our opinion. I just think B's confusing. I liked it at first, but then when I read it, I think we're gonna say, well, I'm not selling agricultural. And the Foreign Person Act is totally different than the.
But this is in the farm and ranch form though. Is Scott, does that make a
Oh, it
difference?
is strictly farm and ranch. I'm sorry.
And
I
Brian,
also read it when you came back.
Brian just had a good comment.
This isn't, we put it in paragraph 20, federal tax requirements, and it's not a tax requirement. Shouldn't it go into the laundry list of all the various notices under 6G?
Well, it's not a title notice, is it?
It's not a tax.
Well, it's not a title notice either. So why don't we just say federal requirements?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's really just a federal
Good
requirement,
idea.
but
Yeah, take out tax.
Just take out tax in terms of the title.
Add may and take out tax.
So I think since this is really a footnote, it's not contractual anyway, it's just a disclosure, right? So typically when I draft custom contracts, when we're talking about footnotes or something like that, we'll put either a true footnote in the contract or we'll put in brackets that as of today, this is what this says. But you have to comply with it otherwise. So we say you have to comply with ABC statute. As of today, this is what you have to do.
As of.
But who knows tomorrow?
This contract.
Right, as of the date of this contract up here, right? So at the date that this form is, that's how I would do it if you want to do it precisely.
Custom contract.
Right, but I mean.
This is going to be a contract that's going to be used for years.
Yeah, but the same statement is true. What you're saying is as of today, this is a true statement, but we don't know if it'll be tomorrow.
Or they, 15%. Yeah, if they change the statute, how long does it take for us to catch up the contract?
Well, in this case, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
35 years.
There you go. What if for next meeting, another comment.
So how many federal requirements are there? And I mean, we only have 2 under federal requirements. Are there other federal requirements?
You've been missing a lot. It's a good question. So how many should we be putting in there?
I know, this is what I said before. I worry about adding this because now it's like FERPTA, it affects the buyer, right? They could end up paying those taxes. So that needs to be there. But as we start adding these things, then it's like, what are we missing? And when we change it to federal requirements, that gives me the impression that all the federal requirements are in this paragraph. And I'm pretty sure they're not.
Yeah, don't discriminate.
So I just don't like it.
And it's called tax requirement in the other.
We're not pushing this through today. So what if we look at for next meeting, adding that specificity to A, look at the language, how we could beef that up, and then come back to this discussion on keeping the specificity together with the new one for A, or taking it out and making it simple like Brian's suggestion.
Yes, but I want to go back and add something to what Lee said. I'm not sure there are other federal tax or other federal requirements that are part of the contract. Okay, there may be issues that come into play in a deal. like stepped up basis and 1031s, which we're gonna address, but we're not the mother of the world here. This isn't
Right,
a
so why are we doing
contract,
this?
because that has this does have to do with the closing.
It's a question where that line is, right? And we decided the last time that it'd be good to put the disclosure in there, and it's the form of it now. And we can see how that works out. But
I feel like in my experience with working with contracts, sometimes less is more. Would it be better to just say, there might be some other things that you have to do that aren't incorporated here? Is that too broad?
That gets
How does that
confusing.
help?
Yes.
They're gonna
Well-
turn to you guys and say, what are those things?
Right.
Well, but we wouldn't have to change it, and we would send them back to the title, because this is all getting done. We're not doing anything with this anyway. It's going back to the title company, you know what I mean?
okay.
In case you wanted to see the form.
Oh, there we go. Let's just make an addendum of the form. Add it for paragraph 22.
Let's publish it as a Trek form. How about
Exactly.
that?
Let's do it. Okay, well, I think we talked through that one. Let's look for next meeting at how we can be more specific in A, maybe some other federal tax requirements or other requirements that may or may not be in there, and then we can have a continued discussion on that next time. But I think we talked it through enough
So
today.
that's the amendment.
It changed.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, I think that changed in 2010, but they kept the number the same.
Okay, the next change we have that is new is the third-party financing addendum that I see, which is on page 67 of our materials. 68 actually is where the change is located. And this is adding the requirement to provide some proof of not obtaining buyer approval, right? So if we go back historically, we made a change many years ago now that required that 3 days before closing on the property approvals not given by the lender for the buyer to provide some written notice of that. And that avoided the problem of showing up the closing and having somebody say it didn't appraise or this issue or that, and the seller's like, well, show me. And so we made this requirement to do it before closing, 3 days before closing. And we'll go through that language we changed up. And there's some case law that ties into this calculation period too. But the change here is to do a similar thing with buyer approval. There was a big push out there, and we hear this on a weekly basis, is somebody's using 2A as an option period, basically.
Yeah.
And are saying, they put 20 days there, they're saying, well, I didn't get approved. And a lot of the times there's no basis for it. And when he asks them, well, show me you didn't get approved, of course, there's nothing to enforce a requirement to get the documents over to prove it. So I personally really like this change. I think it's well drafted. There is a comment on the grammar side from Robin Harris later on in the comments, Robin Harris, Texas Realtors, that the term provision, it's about halfway through the paragraph there, is in a different different contract named paragraph, not provision. And so to make it consistent, changing provision to paragraph.
Or subparagraph.
Or I don't know if we use subparagraph in the.
Attorneys, is it a provision? Is that the correct word to use in both A and B, where paragraph appears in the last sentence of B? What is the right word?
And the other, let's see where the other reference
What's
is.
right there in B? It's in the
It's
same,
in
B, yeah, in
the
B,
same
that's right.
paragraph.
Terminates under this
Separate sub.
paragraph.
My recollection on court cases is that if you use the term paragraph, this paragraph is good because you're talking specifically about this paragraph. If you're talking about provision, it encompasses all the subparagraphs and including anything before it. I don't think it matters in this one because the result is the same. So,
The 2A and 2B should be the same.
right.
So we need to just pick which one we.
Right. So the question is, that's the reason why a lot of times you'll see this paragraph 3A or this paragraph 2A, because then you're specifying which one it is. But it works either way in this particular case. I think you're okay. But if we're consistent, you want to go with paragraph, I'm fine with that.
Well, I'd like to say paragraph 2A. because paragraph is all of paragraph 2.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's
It should
what the
be,
courts
except
will
that it's
argue
written
is
in
what,
2A.
when you say paragraph, which
If you
paragraph are you
clear,
talking
say,
about?
If buyer terminates this contract under this paragraph 2A.
Right.
There's a couple references and there's one that uses both. Paragraph 18C says complies with the provisions of this paragraph. So that's going into the
It's just extra
provisions of
words.
the sub, yeah, extra words. I like just using
Right.
the paragraph 2A or something, but that's as far as use of the term, provisions are what's within that paragraph or the paragraph's overall whole thing. But I do like the paragraph 2A to be.
Yeah, I do too. I like that better.
So you say you prefer paragraph to contract?
Sure.
Well, and I like the idea of being specific about which
Space,
one.
buyer approval, that's a huge space.
Yeah, and it's not formatted on the
Yeah.
side as well of having the justification there on the
Right,
left.
yeah, the formatting is just wonky. There's an extra tab.
And going back, John, to your example, I think the use of provisions, it says provisions of this paragraph. Because there's more than one, and in the current topic, there's really only one issue.
Well, there's 2 issues under the paragraph in each sub one. So you have 2A, 2B, which is why Brian commented we should say paragraph
I'm
2A.
saying, but there is only one provision in 2A. Are you following what I'm saying? And in this, back in 18C, it talks about multiple provisions of this paragraph.
Right.
In this particular case, it works no matter what you put.
It does.
No, I think everybody's on board with that.
I do think that maybe going forward with all of our references to terminating under this paragraph, under paragraph 2A, we might want to choose a protocol that says this is the protocol we follow, which I like being specific about naming the paragraph, but that's.
I do too.
I like that too.
Let's do it.
All right.
Write it down.
Hey,
Under
Add
this
it to our
paragraph
protocols.
2A, and then changing B under this paragraph 2B. Is that what we decided?
Yes.
Perfect.
To be, or not to be.
Let's see, in 2B, what is
In 2B, we made some clarification language regarding the calculation of deadlines. And we'll go over the case law later there, but this was to address specific issues that came up in multiple transactions. And it's good to hear y'all see it as
All
well.
the time.
So this specifies that's on or before the 3rd day to fit in with the legal language that we were able to find, just to clarify. Go ahead.
Question, should there be a reference to paragraph 4 where it says the 3-day notice of termination requirements in 2B does not apply to FHA and VA? And a buyer or agent who does not read all the way down there should, total question, no opinion, should there be reference to the fact that there is another provision where the 3 days do not apply? And that's the FHA and VA buyer who can terminate on the day of closing. And that's within the guidelines, the federal guidelines for FHA and VA. And it gets missed.
So it's moving the last sentence of 4.
Not moving it,
But
just referring
adding.
like in a parenthesis, see paragraph 4. I mean, I don't know how else to do it without making paragraph, the B, 2B longer, but it doesn't apply to FHA and VA buyers, so they may try to utilize a right that they don't have to follow.
Well, they just need to read the contract.
I haven't personally
I
seen
understand
it
what
being.
you're saying, but I just,
Well,
I mean, it's there and.
speaking to what she's saying, so we teach and our agents understand what that provision is. However, we all the time have situations where if we're utilizing and we'll have other agents at other brokerages literally say, well, you can't do that because you have to get the 3-day notice. And we're like, well, we're FHA. And they don't read in that paragraph. And so we're constantly having to point it out. Education is a huge need. But we're constantly having to point it out. Even though we teach our agents how to read the contract and go through it, it doesn't mean everyone does.
And I'm just simply saying that, yes, they may have a misunderstanding about it, but we shouldn't have to repeat in every paragraph of every contract 3 times
The same stuff.
the same stuff. I mean, it's there. If somebody says that, oh, well, I have my 3 days, well, all you have to do is, I mean, it's right there.
Pretty black and white language.
I don't know, I don't think it needs to be.
Just a
redundant.
thought for the very reasons that you both have said, it happens all the time. And yes, education is always a good answer, but if we can make it simpler within the document. And again, I don't want to make B to be longer, but is there a connection between the two? And, you know, if it's not felt necessary, we just go back to making sure we educate.
Well, what, to repropose this real quick of just moving the sentence, because if it's a matter of position and where it's located, if you just take out the 3-day notice of this paragraph 2B, or however we phrase it, does not apply to paragraph 4.
Well,
VA,
the only time you're gonna be reading it is if you're getting FHA or VA
Right.
financing.
Yeah, that's true.
So leave it there. Although I do have a
Sure.
major comment. I think requirements should be requirement
Under,
Where?
in that sense.
I guess you use the word
Requirement to be does not apply. So you can ask for
Singular.
Okay. all right.
singular or change does.
Can't hear
to
you
do.
really very well.
Where are you talking, Brian?
Or paragraph 4
In paragraph
at the
4,
last sentence.
the 3-day notice of termination requirements in 2B does not apply to this paragraph.
Isn't it requirements because you have to,
Then change to.
Then does to do.
yep.
The 3-day
Okay.
notice of
Do-
termination.
How'd that get bypassed?
Do, I'm sorry, this end of the table's having a little hard time.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
And
okay.
it does
So in
require-
paragraph 4 right now, the 3-day, starting at the very last sentence of the overall paragraph 4, it says the 3-day notice of termination requirements in 2B does not apply. It said requirements does instead of requirements do. Or if it's singular requirement, that's fine to use does. So
Oh,
we're just talking about a grammatical
it's not the
issue.
word requirements.
No,
Okay, we
That
have
is
does
the
and
word
do.
requirements, because it is only
Yes.
one requirement.
Right. So we change,
I think it's requirement.
Right, and then, there you go.
It does apply.
let's see, is it requirement?
I think it's a
Correct. So all we
requirement.
need to do
You
is
must
take
fit
out
it within 3
Yes.
days.
Grammar, please.
And take out the not, right?
Love it.
Exactly.
And then it does
No,
not apply.
the requirement does not apply. Correct.
So take out the S.
I have added
Correct.
value to
That's.
That is a remarkable catch.
It only
You
took
almost
you,
set
how
the bar
long have you
pretty
been on
high
the
here.
committee? Brian? So, there you go.
All right.
I'm
Well,
still in the negative.
so what I suggest doing is are now to the new forms. I think we go ahead and walk through these. If everybody's okay, then take a bathroom break before the comments. Or do you want to take a bathroom break now?
No.
Now? All right, we'll take a bathroom break now. Let's take we'll come back at 11 o'clock, 7 minutes, which I think is how long. So the next thing we have is to go through the new forms that have been prepared for us to look at. We have 2 different ones, the section 1031 exchange addendum and the notice to purchase or special taxing or assessment district. So we'll start with the 1031 language, which largely came out of the Farm and Ranch Working Group. And this Farm and Ranch want to tee this up, and I'm not sure if there's anything, this is prepared. Does everybody like the form the way it is? I think the language has been discussed already, but
I have some thoughts on it. I mean, I know we beat this and I think we were on different sides of the spectrum. At least I was on one opposite side. I don't like B, and to be more specific, to cooperate with one another. I think that's vague. I think take all reasonable action. I think reasonable is begging for litigation. And what does accomplish really mean? And to take it on a more specific note, I just sold something, did 1031. I didn't need the buyer's help. I don't need the buyer's cooperation for anything at all. We bounced this idea back and forth. Some would think we need to talk about it because people put it in special provisions and they say it, but they don't really understand it. You don't need them. All we're doing, I remember SJ had a strong opinion on this, believe it or not. And we talked about, like, you know, how in Farm and Ranch people want to know, but it's really more of a leverage tool or a buyer, seller? Do I want to squeeze that seller? Do I want to squeeze that buyer? But that rationale aside, the verbiage, if I can confine the logic to the verbiage, even if we were to keep the form, I don't know what accomplishment is or reasonable. I didn't need, again, the buyer. I am now buying something on a 1031 in Fredericksburg. Is it a reasonable action for me because she's already asked to extend the time because she wants to go buy something else with her 1031? So did I agree to cooperate? Well, obviously I hadn't had this form yet, but in the future, have I agreed to
What contract
cooperate?
did you use? Was it Farm and Ranch or the regular, another contract?
It wasn't Farm Ranch. That's a good point. I used unimproved, but in theory though, would I have to cooperating? Let's say I am gonna buy 160 acres outside of Lufkin and they want to do a 1031. If they can't find anything, am I obligated to cooperate and give them another 6 months, 2 months, 30 days, 80 days? Like.
No.
Yeah.
Well, I want to make 2 points to that, and I'll tee it up to SJ is, one, I think there is some level of cooperation that's required to sign over the documents to the exchange company, right? And so the exchange company is one stepping in. They're going to be part of the transaction on the closing statement. They're on the, it has to go through with them being the party that's acquiring the property. I don't necessarily think that in most transactions hasn't been an issue. There has been a request from the Farm and Ranch side for this form, but this form doesn't necessarily have to be used either. Even if you do a 1031, you're not required to use this. But if somebody wanted up front to say, I want to make sure I'm not going to get a pesky buyer or seller from, not signing this form. Sure. Which has happened, not much, I would admit, but it has happened. Then just don't sign it. Or if you want to have comfort, do it. But Esther?
Well, and I want to, with all due respect to the member of my committee, our committee, I think you're being just obtuse. Accomplish an exchange. I mean, seriously, anybody knows what that means. To accomplish anything means to just get the regular dictionary. It's to do it. So I don't have an issue with that. The reasonable actions, what Tony's alluding to in his mind that he's not saying, best efforts is a legal standard that means every possible effort. And we do not want that. We're not requiring people on purpose to do best efforts, which sometimes they're required to do. We're just talking about reasonable, and reasonable is in the context of whatever that transaction is. And extending the contract.
Transactions like it.
Maybe, and extending the contract, I don't know that that's automatically a thing or not.
I just know that reasonable says we're litigating. Like right now, we disagree. If Farm Ranch goes up, we're
And
gonna.
when you close, you have to sign
Hold on one
something that
second.
says you're gonna do all the reasonable things in case somebody left out a piece of paper or they did something wrong.
So Ron's got a comment here.
So some of the 1031 exchange language I remember seeing, I was looking for it online here, but is what you just brought up. I think I see in there that there's an assignment language that says you agree to an assignment at closing to a qualified intermediary. And then the other language I've seen is as long as it doesn't delay closing or cost the seller any additional money. I've seen that in there before. So I don't know if that gets more specific for you.
It does. What that tells me is, again, I appreciate that this is optional form, but what that tells me is when I won't name names, but when one brokerage at Farm and Ranch is arguing with another brokerage, or we're up in Waxahachie fighting over 100 acres where she's out of.
Christie.
Right. And we're going back and forth, and the brokers don't necessarily understand what reasonable means. And then the lawyers start getting involved, and I'll admit there's more than enough lawyers that don't know what's going on either. And then we have to start litigating. Then we're going to go argue to the court with what Ron just said. Hey, take a look at this is what it means in context of what reasonable would be, even though the contract didn't say that. Then we finally figure it out and we get it done at mediation.
Well, why don't we specifically add in the specific points that they'll do the reasonable things, including agree to assign, and as long as the actions do not delay the closing or cause additional costs to the seller.
I like that.
Just say it.
Let's say Brian has a suggestion here.
Well, I'm going to give you language, just simple language that I've used in the past. And it just says either party may close this transaction as a tax deferred exchange under section 1031 of the Internal Revenue Code, provided the other party will not incur any additional obligation and closing will not be delayed as a result of the exchange.
So you only just need to add,
That's
you only need,
Let me just say this. I went to a seminar.
Can you email that to Ross?
yeah, the only thing you need to add is the assignment, but we can figure
Yeah,
that out.
well, I went to a seminar many years ago about 1031 exchange, and the guy who was running the seminar, he said, don't put one of these clauses in your contract. He said, number one, you don't need it. You don't need the other side to agree to the assignment. You merely need to notify them of the assignment, and that doesn't take their consent. He says, but what it does do is it tips off the other party that they may have you over a barrel. You have a deadline by which you have to complete your exchange, and it may affect your ability to negotiate. He said, I don't think that doing any of these clauses is either necessary, and it may put you in a box. He says, so I would just wonder, is this really anything for Trek to deal with? I mean, maybe TR could do it, but I don't know that this is necessary as a Trek contract form.
So I just have a clarifying question, because you said it might be an optional form, and I was under the impression that if Trek promulgated the form, we were supposed to use it.
That's what we've always said.
I mean,
Yeah, promulgated it, you have to use it.
right, so I didn't realize we could have
Says-
optional forms.
Right, but this one says promulgated.
Well, no, if you look at the HOA, it's not mandatory to use, right? It's optional.
It's mandatory if it's needed in the transaction, or if there's an HOA, right?
No, you don't have to use it, right? If it's a,
I don't know.
But if I want to do a 1031 exchange, do I have to use this language, or can I use any language I want? This Trek.
you don't have to use it. I mean, you don't have to use it for the contract.
No, but you have to.
But you can't write something else. You have to-
conversation,
Hold on, Commissioner, you have on the Zoom? Let's see. Hands up.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much. The discussion and a couple of working groups with Farm and Ranch, it's more a matter of full disclosure than it is which party is or is not going to do a 1031 tax deferred exchange. So we on the Farm and Ranch side of it, and we deal with it every day, it was more about making sure all the parties are notified, because those funds don't go to the seller. And the buyer then, it has put the seller on notice that they're doing that. There are significant tax consequences should a seller decide they're not going to sell for whatever reason. There could be significant tax consequences. So we just felt like it was more information to clarify that that's exactly what's going to happen. And what we use says may or may not. I mean, it's may. It's not they shall. It's not they will. It's that they are. It's possibly subject to a 1031 tax deferred exchange. And it was the discussion came from full disclosure.
And the language where you said you use may, where is that coming from?
It's what an attorney prepared for me to use.
Okay.
So a suggestion then that she thinks it ought to be a notice instead of an addendum signed by both parties, but just a notice by the party?
Actually, in other states' contracts, it's one sentence in the contract that says buyer or seller, check, may use this may use this in a 1031 tax deferred exchange.
We may be able to work that into Brian's suggested language, which we'll put up here in a minute. Chairman Kessner, I saw you shaking your head. Do you agree? No? Okay.
John, I had my hand up earlier on Brian's language.
Okay, do you want to wait till we put it on the screen, or do you want to talk about it?
Whatever you want to do.
So it's more like the commercial contracts. It just says buyer check, seller check is going to participate.
Yes.
SJ, go ahead.
So my whole issue contra to Brian's language is, at least what he said, I want to see it.
That's
It
right
it
there.
implies that if they don't do this, you don't have that in there, that they can't. Either party may close as a tax deferred.
Can you pull up the commercial
If
transactions?
you don't have
form?
it in there, they can't. Does that make sense?
If I can find that paragraph.
Yeah, and this may, are you familiar with the commercial contract link? I guess we don't have access to it. As attorneys, which will repeat our request for Texas Realtors provide members of this committee with access.
Who is listening? Anyone?
Yeah, that's, Robin is not here. So if we look at, it's in paragraph 18G of the commercial, at least the version I was able to pull up online, of the
Illegal.
commercial improved.
Yeah.
18.
Well, I mean,
And that language might bridge the gap between Brian's and your concern and the language we have here.
Where's it?
I'm pulling it up here now. So.
Oh, the commercial contract improved property.
There it is.
There it is.
Can you eliminate the boxes just by saying either party may complete this transaction?
I think you could, but one of the concerns that was raised by the commissioner and others in our past comments was the disclosure part of it. Having one party understand that the other party's intending to do 1031. So I think we have to answer that question of, do we want to make it a disclosure or of a party's intent to do it, or just a general disclosure about 1031s?
Well, you're attaching it as an addendum.
Well, not necessarily. Right now, we're talking about putting this in the contract itself.
No, I don't like that.
No? Okay.
I'd rather get better.
I mean, there are gonna be people who think that they can do a 1031 exchange of their house.
And that they need to attach it all the time, just use it every time, just in case.
So if you keep it separate and not within the body, which I kind of agree with y'all, is it a notice or technically is it an addendum that needs both signatures?
Well, this is addendum because you're dealing with some obligations here,
Okay.
right? You got an obligation of cooperation and good faith.
Okay, so then if we stick with addendum, separate document, then it's just about language that SJ likes, I like, or Brian likes. Actually, I like Brian, so, or SJ likes or Brian likes.
Well, I liked what we amended, adding in
Okay.
that it doesn't cost you anything. and
Okay, I like that too.
We agree to this assignment, doesn't cost and doesn't delay.
I like that.
So, yeah, that's in our language.
So as of our language that we have drafted here versus the language they have up there, what's the feeling?
I prefer what we're gonna go with instead of this more verbose, fully in good faith type verbiage. I prefer just more nuts and bolts.
Not good faith.
Hey, I'm looking at the screen.
He's
They're
talking
asking
about
if
up
we wanna-
there.
we want to use a commercial contract verbiage.
Yeah.
I didn't want to.
Okay, thank you for pulling that to my attention. I generally hate when it says good faith because nobody even knows what good faith is anymore. And there is no good faith obligation in Texas contracts anymore unless you put it in there and nobody knows what it is unless you define it.
Good faith means you go to mass every week.
Well, you know, under my calculator, so we don't have mass. I go to red mass.
Yeah.
All right, so are we back to the language that we have in the form as is?
Well, we have Brian's language here, and then do you want to go with the addenda language? And
It looks like we're down to Brian's language or a tweak of B with what SJ was trying to mirror from the USC code.
well, if I understand correctly, there's a desire under A to disclose this. So I would keep A as it is in the form.
True.
And then you could say, a party instead of either party. You could say a party may close the transaction, provided that will not incur any additional obligation and closing will not be delayed. And we don't have a non-assignment clause in there, so we don't need to deal with the assignment, I guess, because it's assignable, because we don't say it's not, right?
Correct.
So maybe we'll just substitute Brian's language with this small modification under A and make that the 2B.
One thing that's left out of that short version is a cooperation clause.
Okay, so we could say,
Well, and the longer one also says the other party will not incur any expense for liability.
Well, that's what C says.
We do have that in there.
So we're
I think
gonna
it's
leave
good for-
C in there then?
I hate to say will agree.
Stand alone like
I
it
was- I
is
was-
now,
I was-
people will see that, and those are two very good points.
That's fine. I was thinking we were trying to get rid of B and
Parties
C and
will
just put something
reasonably
in there.
cooperate to achieve this objective.
Really think we just need to add the delay part in either B or C, and the rest of it's kind of already covered.
I mean, on C, could we just take away the period and say, and closing and funding shall not be delayed?
In fact,
Under paragraph C of the,
Yeah, just
Well,
add
let's
one
have
at the
that.
end.
provided go at the end of the parties will reasonably cooperate.
I'm sorry,
Internal revenue code, period.
okay.
And then that provided goes at the end of the next sentence. Well, cut and paste it.
Is that what you wanted?
Go back to that. I'm saying keep the provided. Okay, go back to that provided, but cut and paste the provided to go at the end of the next sentence.
the whole,
The whole.
The whole, oh, okay, gotcha. I guess I don't need a comma there.
Is that like a header to the other paragraphs about the intention?
This would be a B.
Okay.
That sentence or that paragraph could be the entire addendum.
Well,
missed
everybody
the
wants the
header.
disclosure requirement that a party does intend to do it.
You attach the addendum, that's not a disclosure.
No.
Why'd you put this addendum on?
The use of the word other parties, should we be clear and go to what the suggestion here in the form is, the non-exchanging party, so that there's clarity of who we're talking about?
The non-exchanging.
The parties will reasonably cooperate and the non-exchanging party will not incur.
Vicinity.
And I'm not sure
If you want to say this, then
additional obligation. If you're not going to incur any additional obligation, then what is your obligation to reasonably cooperate? What do you have to do to reasonably cooperate? Obviously, that's going to be, you're obligating yourself to cooperate. And then the next parenthetical says, but I'm not going to incur any additional.
Yeah, it should say
That's just
additional
expense.
costs.
Yeah,
Yeah, expense or
additional
cost.
costs.
Okay.
And closing will not be
We have
delayed.
something. Then that
Good
covers
point.
it.
Yeah.
I think that for this form, for this addendum, we should be looking at AB, ABC, something where it's broken down. I think one big paragraph gets lost. I don't think they read it. They're not as likely to read every word when there's just one big paragraph. I like having the ABC.
And I think we have AB now under the new suggestion where B is 2 sentences long and A would be the one sentence.
So really, we would strike C altogether.
But C is where y'all said we had liability already covered.
Oh,
And so if we don't
right.
put liability here, you gotta leave C. And by the way, C also says no additional expense.
So I just think we're making it hard.
Yeah.
I would like to suggest, even if we're giving a disclosure, that A does not say intends to, just says may.
I think the temperature of the room was that most wanted the, somebody, seller or buyer, in making an indication.
Check
whether
the
they
box.
wanted to.
You can check the box,
I
but
agree
instead
with
of saying
you.
intend to use, just say may use.
Oh, I see. So leave it as is with the disclosure, just put may instead.
A is the disclosure, but instead of saying intends to use, say may use.
I don't have a strong,
I don't-
I think.
I think if you use may, then what's the point of having the addendum? Because they may, even without the addendum. I mean, if we want to disclose, then it's, if we're looking for disclosure, I think the word is intend.
I'm good with that. I don't have a strong
I
feeling.
might
I think
also
either way.
default. Do I need to, you know?
Okay, well, let's see what the final
So-
language is here. So we have A.
Okay.
Grab hold of it.
So do we need
What are we
the,
gonna do without Ron?
do we need the first sentence? So paragraph A,
I don't have to worry about it.
paragraph A is where it says there's the intention to do the 1031. Do we not, do we need the first sentence of that in B? Because isn't
No.
that what we're saying? in
That's
A?
kind of what I thought.
No, we don't.
So really, we need,
Oh, I see what you're
Get
saying.
rid of the first sentence of that, of B, because it's already
right.
exactly what A says.
And then B is your paragraph about the cooperation and the expense.
I like that.
And you're full of cutting idea there.
But then you just have A and B and get rid of C.
Correct. All right.
All right.
I think it's a good change. Okay, so we'll push that through. Say push it through, we'll bring it back to the next meeting. Okay, the next one, notice of purchase or special taxing or assessment district.
Font is giant.
And we're just,
Thank the legislature.
yes, so the
As Abby
legislature
said.
required this to be in 24-point font.
Seriously?
Mhm. So we'll probably get a lot of comments about just stuff about it.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness.
But unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about this.
We really mean it.
Now, this is a statutory form, the language, right? So we're not changing anything in the language itself.
It is, so a couple things are not strictly required, so like the headings for the paragraphs, that's something we added, that's not required by statute. The other thing to mention is that the way it's worded in statute, it says that, you include these statements as applicable to the district. So in theory, if something, instead of a checkbox, if something was or was not applicable, they might just include the one statement and not have the other. But to make it available or accessible for multiple districts to use, that's why we included the checkboxes.
And all districts are required to have a website with the form on the website as well, I believe. So every district should have it out there. And this is the first time we're going over to do a form like a MUD form, right? To be able to have that from TREC itself. There's been a request for it. I think getting it from the district personally is the best place to go.
Right.
But we are proposing to use this form.
So will this reflect?
Is this for all of them though? Is this for all of them?
Because that's what I was looking for clarification.
No, so the PID notice is under Property Code, Chapter 5. This
Okay.
one is under the Water Code, Chapter
So this is
So this
MUDs
is
and
for MUDs.
WCIDs.
Water Districts, yeah.
Yeah,
This
so
is also MUDs and water.
this is MUDs. Yeah,
Okay.
so what they changed in there used to be 3 different forms of the notice.
Right.
In this last change, they changed it to just one form. So you don't have to see if it's in the unincorporated county or the ETJ or the city limits anymore.
Sure.
And so now that it's been condensed, we decided to go ahead and propose to make a TREC form
So
available
this
for use.
form would cover MUD notices and WCID notices.
It covers MUDs and yes, it should, I think it covers the BCIDs as well.
And then the PID has its own form.
Correct.
Okay.
And this is one thing.
SUDs? Sorry,
No, and this is a great issue because one of the biggest confusions out there for everybody, I think including everybody on this committee, is what type of districts are out there? What's the breadth of them and what roles should they fall under, especially with more and more being added? And I have this as a project when I get time, I want to go through and just make a list of every single one because you have to see what chapter it's graded under to know what obligation there is to disclose.
Right.
How would an agent know how to fill this out?
Yeah.
Well, that's what we were talking about, why
I'm
you
looking
should
at
pull,
this going, huh?
well, why you should pull the,
Makes me nervous.
can we add a notice? Can we add a notice right after the title that encourages the user not to use this form, but to go to the to the website form?
Well, as a bigger issue, we don't necessarily need this one, right? We don't have to promulgate it or suggest that it be promulgated. So are we solving something here or are we not by having our own form?
This frustrates me when we go back, when people don't remember or weren't part of the meeting before, but we took the position that, is the chairman still here? Yes. Okay, we took the position that because, I'm gonna lean back to the consumer protection particularly, that because this is a seller's disclosure notice, essentially, it's a disclosure notice that's required that we don't have already, that we would follow this is another one of our rules, like on the seller's disclosure notice that TREC promulgates, it is strictly the language of the statute, the property code 5.008. That's all it is, and we don't add anything. Of course, TAR/Texas Realtors has created a much longer form with frankly some really good information in it. But that we would, because this is a disclosure form, seller's disclosure form, we would make it standalone because it contains so much instead of adding it into our form. I mean, I guess we could smoosh it into our form, but we, at that meeting, decided that it was appropriate for TREC to promulgate this form. I'm looking at Scott to see if he had something that was.
I don't have a problem with the TREC pushing this form out as available, right? But I do want to direct everyone to the website of the district because they're going to have to go to the district anyway to get the information. Right.
Yeah, you can't fill this out without
So
going to the
it's going
website.
to, right.
Okay, so how about up front, go to the website of the district?
So a couple of points on this. I'll start with the district website. We know we're seeing districts not have the stuff, right? The information and is there regulation over them? Yes. I'm not sure how much is actually done. I think not any. And I'm not saying that as a slight. I think that's actually the response we received from DCQ in terms of things like this. The second, so there is a little bit of, there's a lot of conversation, I think, in the industry world about what are we supposed to do? We can't find it. I'm not sure if this helps that issue, but I know that there's been interest. We've received interest on something like this from industry. I will also say, if you put it out or if you don't put it out, I still think it's going to come up in our sunset review of disclosures because this is one of the areas that we now sort of launched that review. But like I said, I think either way you go, it's going to be talked about. So I just want to bring that to the table in terms of these are the conversations about this that are happening outside. And I understand all the points and that's, I get that. I just want to give you that information.
And the fact that it's not available on the websites, by and large, and hearing that, or not by and large, but several, leads me to believe we absolutely do need it because there's no other place to get it rather than going to some other one that may be filled out with different information.
The
So that would be
requires both, can't we have both?
But if we,
It requires, the people to file it in the county clerk's office about special districts, but it also specifically in the legislation, the person who proposes to sell or convey real property located in a district must give to the purchase the written notice. So it
Right.
requires it of the seller, which winds up in our lap.
Well, and this isn't the recorded version, right? It's not notarized. It's the separate notice that actually gets filed, signed at the title company. But yes, I mean, as far as the notice goes, this is
You
satisfying.
have to give a notice.
I
There
think-
may have to be
I think what may be helpful, if we put a disclosure in there that says that the district is required under whatever section to file this on their website or have it available on their website, the brokers can send this form and it says here that you're required to do it. And then maybe the word starts spreading out a little bit among the districts that they need to stick the forms up on their website.
I mean, yes.
No, I like that language. Put that right up front.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you want to try to craft some?
Do you want to do that or do you want to let staff? do that?
They need
Yeah.
someone. The agents are not gonna know how to fill this out.
I think
We talked,
staff-
do you want to take a stab at that or we can get it afterwards?
Well, hold on. You said something, and this came up last time, and let me reiterate this. Agents aren't gonna know how to fill this out. Agents do not touch this form. This is a seller's disclosure form. Agents should not be touching this other than to say, here, client, fill this out.
Okay, sellers wouldn't know how to fill this
Yeah, they
out.
wouldn't, but
But that instruction
Hold on,
that
hold on.
Ron suggested,
Hold on one second.
So to the point that you were making earlier, the agents have it embedded in their head that if there is a form that's promulgated, don't use anything else. And that's just gonna create a ton of confusion with them trying to get the data that goes in here, writing it wrong, misrepresenting, all of that stuff that comes with it. So if we put a notation on here, this form or as provided by
Right.
district,
Right.
then I think you guys as, educators can say, you don't have to use this one, you can use the one on the board.
That's right.
So, and to that point, I think most likely if you would recommend this form go forward, you tie it to a rule. And so under the rule, you would say this is for voluntary use.
Yeah.
So you could use the district form if there is one, could use this.
Right, okay.
And we are teaching that in legal one.
Yeah.
We are reiterating.
is there somewhere to say to be completed by seller?
Yeah, I was gonna say, because I don't know that it's clear that it's a disclosure notice.
It's not clear. and we can't
Right,
change
and
the
even
name.
in the other one that we have now, the PID notice,
Notice to purchaser,
yeah,
I mean,
But I don't think agents are gonna look at that and go, oh, this is a seller's disclosure that they have to fill out.
and
I
agents fill
think-
out the lead-based paint disclosure all the time, they're checking boxes and sending it off. Based on what
they
their
shouldn't,
consumer tells them, but
they shouldn't. You know?
telling you, yeah.
I'm telling
We need to be
you,
clear.
I know.
Yeah, you need to be clear and probably
I'm telling you,
do
they
some
should.
training that that's an additional seller's disclosure and we don't fill out any.
Well,
So,
that's
if
not
we
on the seller's
circle-
disclosure either, that it says, agent, don't touch this.
Yeah,
So we'll add for the next meeting, the disclosure language at the top. Does anybody have any changes or suggestions on the titles? It sounds like it's the only other
The only, can I back up just a little bit? This was effective September 1, correct? This bill, I mean, I'm looking at it.
There's two, one was a immediate effective date and then the other was September.
Okay, so it's effective. So in my opinion, we need to finalize this today and send it forward. This is not something that we can lollygag around and wait on. But I think
My only
Mr.
retort to that would be,
Kestner has his.
yeah, is the MUD requirement's been out there for a long time, right? And we haven't had a form internally for that. So I'm not sure it's as urgent as that, but,
The notice
Chairman
requirement is
Kestner?
new.
Yeah, I mean, as in practice, we've always had to disclose the MUD district, and there's three forms. Is it in ETJ, outside of ETJ, part in ETJ? It's been really, really confusing. So this single form certainly makes it easy for the listing agent to have the seller sign it. I totally agree with Ron. There needs to be big language there. This is the disclosure. The seller fills it out. Theoretically, they can go to the website and get the information. The only change I would make, instead of calling it a notice, I would say disclosure to purchaser of special tax assessment district or whatever. I love the form, but I'm not touching it. But at least we have one form versus three. But we need language that this is a disclosure for the seller to fill out.
and the title itself is prescribed by the statute, so we can't monkey with that, but we can definitely work that into the language at the top.
Well, how about if we just add the word seller's disclosure concerning the property at, the very first two words?
Yeah. I would also put for a MUD or whatever, so they actually, because I don't think everybody's gonna understand that.
Well, but,
Well-
I mean, back to my
I think
prior
special
point,
district.
I mean, what is new, I agree that yes, there have been some information out there before, but the language of the law that is actually new, the new part of the law is there will be a disclosure given. So again, this is brand new legislation. It is effective already. It's been effective for over a month, and I do not think we can sit on our hands. We
Okay.
need to
Well, let's
get it ready and send it on
let's
so
work it then.
Trek can.
And what language do we want to say here? Do we want to say, we got to get citation to the code, I guess correctly. What is section something requires?
49.452.
The actual notice is what's prescribed as 49.4521, but the obligations are only are in 452.
Well, it's 1A-1.
Okay, so,
Actually, if you want to get very complicated.
so 49,521,
Can I bring you this?
it prescribes the notice, and then what's the one that prescribes the web? 452? Okay. So what we want to say is section 452, water code, right?
Yeah, I mean, are we gonna just
Well,
maybe not put in any?
well, what,
in
we're
A's and
going to
B's?
have to refer to two different issues here. So section water code requires, do they call them districts or what do they call them? Water districts or
Districts.
districts?
Yep, and it defines district.
Districts to post,
49.452.
to post
I have a question.
the information in this form, is that right?
In the wonderful
Or to
form,
post
there's
this
a paragraph in there
form.
that talks about this.
I don't.
If we have a form, do we need to revise the paragraph about?
What is it?
months
What does
in the wonderful
452 say?
family
It requires them to post this
for
information.
kids for that?
Is amended.
Because we did change it when we got the PID form, we shortened that paragraph in the wonderful
gonna now
family to just
say-
say, see attached, addenda, this needs to be attached. And I think it says addenda, I don't think it
Very
says
top.
notice, because I'm telling you, I don't think it's filling that sucker out.
I was looking for the one that says, the one that requires them
And
to
if it's really
post.
so much disclosure, I think it just needs to be clear.
Is related to a notice provided by parties to the
Hold on,
property.
hold on. It says
If the
453.
property is situated in a utility or other statutorily created district providing water, sewer, drainage, or flood control facilities and services, chapter 49, Texas Water Code
453
requires
says-
seller to deliver and buyer to sign the statutory notice related to the tax rate, ...
Just attached or something.
So now we're
This
providing
is updated too.
the form from
Okay.
Trek through this versus just having the district
Form of this
forms.
notice.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, the public improvement district on number 7, where you're talking about, used to be about that long too, and it had the notice in there. Had the notice, and we changed it
Requires the
to
district.
shorten it and just say an
Post.
addendum containing the required notice shall be
The
attached.
form.
What, who is we? Texas Realtors?
Trek.
No,
On the
Trek
wonderful
doesn't
fam- on the
change
wonderful
anything.
family.
Oh, on the
Yeah,
wonderful.
you're
family.
talking
I
about
thought
the
you were
language
talking
of
about
it.
disclosure. Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking about on the wonderful family
Can
where,
we-
where it talks about MUDs. When we got the PID notice,
On it, what does it say?
we
19.
changed the 1 to 4 family to just say, you've got to follow the code and there's an addendum. And that's what I'm asking about here is, does this make, if we're going to have this addendum, do we have to change? the
This
1 to
isn't
4
an
family?
addendum. This is a notice,
Right.
not an addendum.
Well, that's another point to bring up in a
Wait,
second.
say
Right.
that again?
The PID is also,
But if
A
the
notice.
PID is a
Can
notice.
Can we hold for just a
Yeah,
second?
Yeah, we're letting y'all work on your language.
Yeah, but can we hold the discussion so that everybody can be in on it?
Yeah.
Can we hold just a minute?
I'm just gonna put this up. We're gonna have to change this, but.
Yeah, and Abby has something she needs to add in before we go too crazy.
so I looked at this, district required. It's like, it's not requiring all districts technically, but I think practically it is all districts because it says, district required to maintain an internet public access under. But when I looked at this, it seems like it would practically be.
Everybody.
So I don't know if
Bless you.
there's- If you want to finesse.
Okay.
Did you say what you were saying? Whether it's a addendum.
Oh, yeah.
To everybody.
Well, this is sort of a later issue, but one thing to also think about, and it is related to the PID addendum as well. That language is actually identical. So in the property code in chapter 5, it says basically the PID notice can be part of the contract or an addendum. That same exact language is in the water code. So you may want to think about how you handle that in paragraph 22, because the PID addenda is in paragraph 22. So do you want to make that consistent across the board? Do you want to have those be different?
You know, you just open the worm can.
I know.
Yeah.
Because the
we're not
PID's actually
consistent
phrased
now.
as an addendum.
It is, but that is authorized by the property code. It could be an addendum, but that same exact language is in the property code is in this section as well.
Okay.
So it could be an addendum, or it could be separate, or it could be.
My concern with calling it an addendum almost pushes people to use this form versus the district forms.
Remember what we talked about a couple meetings back was also changing 22 to say addenda and notices, and then adding in the other thing that's not on here, like the seller's disclosure notice, which opened a whole big discussion, and, you know, other items that are not an addenda. So, I mean, and I was a pro, but what I'm mostly pro is being consistent. But if it needs to be on here.
Well, let's tackle the language first.
So this is just a quick throw up, so we can see what.
Throw up.
Right. Just to get something started.
Well, in HB, you just Google Texas HB 2816, it'll bring up what the code says. Or water code. I mean, yeah, and did we put the water code on here? We should cite the water code.
No.
With it saying the users of this form, agents are going to use the form.
Yeah, I was thinking
So we want to
the
say,
sellers are,
Sellers.
or property owners are encouraged.
Yeah, I can read more. I can't look real close.
See very far.
So we take out the too to say property owners and sellers.
Sellers are.
I think it ought to say the Texas water code.
Are they encouraged to use the posted forms or required to use the posted forms?
They're not required.
Encouraged, 'cause they do.
I guess since I'm using singular in this
So
sense,
like
I should
to
say
require
a
that.
seller.
Does it say that? We're
Say what?
ad-libbing.
Is,
No. This is just a notice we're giving to them.
Okay. Would you put Texas in front of water code?
The Texas water code?
No, not because he has section first.
Would you put this on, you're saying put this on the form?
Yeah, right in here,
Right
right
at the
after concerning the property
Before we
or
get
before
into
either
the
one.
form itself.
After code, comma.
Do we need to also talk about it in the 1 to 4?
Hold on.
Well, it's sort of in there.
One thing at a
You
time.
say must notice.
Back to that word encouraged, that makes it sound like the seller has a choice.
They
If
do.
they're in a mud district, the choice could be a problem if they don't disclose.
In lieu of the.
Well-
So should there be a stronger word than encouraged?
Well, they're
Well-
encouraged to use the posted form.
Use this
Yeah.
form.
It said which form of the form do you use? And so we're encouraging the use of district's form,
Use their
not our truck form. So
Encouraged in lieu of using this one.
I would, okay, can I
doesn't
suggest
say
something?
a form.
I think district needs to be a defined
Capitalized.
term, a capitalized term.
Okay, do we need to define it?
Well, I mean, it's kind of defined in the title, but I think it needs to be capitalized. Which will give it a little more gravitas. And
well, district's not capitalized in the code as well. So
Yeah, they
I
don't
know,
capitalize
but
anything.
we're defining it here. So
Well, I
by
don't,
the title.
I don't think we've defined it.
All right, my suggestion is that it have more.
Oh, actually, when we say the district named below, right, requires the district being here.
Oh, that's not what the law says.
Now you're identifying the district in
No,
paragraph 1.
That's not what the law says.
Well,
But
this
they
is
won't be
just a
naming a district
disclosure.
below if they're not using this form and getting it from the district.
That's correct. I liked what you had better before. I would rather we stray less.
District's website should be sent you.
Well, we talked about multiple districts because that's what the language said. And so it said requires district. It requires districts to post. And so it was correct with district.
Let's cover that then, because that's going to dictate the grammar.
Each requires.
What do you,
Well,
do you want to just say,
Each district.
if it's not named below because they don't use our
All
form,
right.
I mean, I'm just
Each
saying, why
district.
don't we just state the law as it is correctly?
okay, each district posts the form.
That's fine.
District. Website.
There you go.
And then the extra, the users of this form in the last sentence need to be, sellers should obtain the information from the district.
Because we don't want the agents to think they're using the form.
And shouldn't seller be capitalized? Or are we just talking about a seller? I think we should capitalize it. Consistent.
Yeah, it should just say seller, the seller.
You want to capitalize seller?
Of this
Yeah.
form.
And
Take
go
out
up
A.
to the second sentence too, when you're finished with that, Ron. A seller, maybe just as capital seller.
All right.
Yeah.
I like use the word applicable. Just the district's website.
Are you having fun?
Where, okay.
Oh.
So you don't use Texas in front of any other references to code?
Yeah,
We should,
that's what I thought. Take this out.
we should.
It's not, it's not.
Keep consistent for now, then we can look at a global change.
Add Texas to all of them.
Yeah, but be consistent, I think we take it out.
Just because we've
What'd you
been
learn in law school?
consistently
What'd you learn in
wrong.
law school? I think they say don't use Texas.
No, they don't. Yes, they do.
Well, since every form
This
says
is not-
Texas.
Pull out the blue book.
The blue-
Green book.
Every form says Texas real estate. Clearly Arizona
Yes, 'cause
water
there is
code
a
isn't
federal
gonna
water
apply.
code too.
I don't,
That's
Hold
another,
on, is Chairman Kessler, are you, so do you see this language here? Does this satisfy what you were suggesting? Yes. Thank you. All right, does everybody like this language?
and where's it gonna live?
Section as well.
This
It's
would
living right under,
concerning the property, right?
correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that is
Now,
it right under concerning the property or is it right above concerning the property?
I would put it right above.
I put it above, and then we also talked about putting, instead of concerning the property at, putting seller's disclosure concerning the property at.
Yeah, yep. Right, so that it's clear.
Where you at, right? Were we gonna have a blank up top here somewhere about the website too? To fill in the website? No, because
No.
we're telling them to go away, yeah,
Oh, this has got to be all capitalized anyway.
correcto. So it's gonna be, oh, you have it right here.
So procedurally, if we wanted to push this one through, what are we, can we push this through to the commission for their next meeting?
More proposals.
Yeah. I think we should also, well, never mind. Got it. Got it. Right in front of my face. Got it. Did everything. Great. Wonderful. Love it. Went away.
So what was the other section that was pulled up a second ago when we had another section?
That was dealing with the notice itself, which is
So we
here.
don't need to put that
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So,
now
do you
the
want to go
question-
ahead and take a vote to propose this so they can take it to the next meeting of the commission?
With the changes,
With this, including with these changes.
we'll entertain a motion as
so
somebody.
moved.
Okay, so we got a motion to push this through for,
Second.
here we go. Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes.
Can we go back to the discussion about that one for family though?
Oh, yes. So circling back to the comment. So the comment is on paragraph, let's go back up to it. We're in the 1 to 4 contract.
And 6, is it 6? Yeah.
It's in
Is it
6.
6 or 7? I didn't really get the
3,
question.
right?
6E3, correct.
Which reads, statutory tax districts, if the property is situated in a utility or other statutorily created district providing water, sewer, drainage, or flood control facilities and services. Chapter 49, Texas Water Code, that's a Texas there.
All right.
Requires seller to deliver.
Back in there. Thank you.
Ready
Right.
back
in
Back
there.
in there.
Requires seller to deliver and buyer to sign the statutory notice relating to the tax rate, bond indebtedness, or standby fee of the district prior to final execution of this contract.
She wasn't looking for that.
And so the question is, do we need to add some reference to this form?
Correct,
Directly in there?
because that's what we did farther down in paragraphs and number 7, if you go to the next page down, where it talks about the PIDs, because that obviously used to have, the notice was in the contract, and when we took it out, it said if it's in a public improvement district, seller must give buyer the written notice as required by whatever code that was, right? But then it says an addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract. So we specified there's gonna be a form. I don't know. I mean, I guess because we're saying that we don't really want them to use the form, we want them to encourage them to use the other thing, maybe, I don't know. I just wanted to make sure because I know that with the PIDs, it changed the
Okay,
whole
time out.
family. so-
Right.
If they use the other form,
Mhm.
here's the question. If they use let's say this district has it together, they use their form.
Mhm.
Is that form now part of our the contract package?
That's the question, right?
No.
I don't, that's why I'm
Yes,
asking.
no.
yeah.
Well,
The same thing with the PID though, right?
right.
Because the PID's out there just like this notice on the websites. And so we've used that language. And I think if we don't want to use, we have to be consistent between the two. I think it's a point well made on those 2 tax districts have the same type of forms, and we have voluntary use forms for those purposes. And so do we want to suggest that it be attached as an addendum? We step back to the overall statutory structure, it has to be provided at or before executing the contract, right? So it can be provided before.
So then it wouldn't be part of the contract.
Well, and then that
The
also,
same with the PID. So
that kind of brings me up to this too, because if a PID is a taxing district, then why wouldn't this new form cover that? Why do we even need the PID form, which?
It's a separate statutory
I
form that's required.
understand the legislature doesn't
Okay.
attend these meetings.
requires it be.
Okay. So the law requires two, I just think it was unclear about, okay, well, it's a taxing district, so which one do I use? I think it'll be a big education piece. Well, you have to use this one because it's from a different part of the law and this
Yeah.
one from
Well, what if we took that language out of the 1 to 4 for the PID? Because we have our new language in the 6E11 or 12 now, that actually lists out all these different notices that are provided. The
right,
following
right.
notices have been provided or attached to this contract.
Have been given
Right,
or
right.
are attached.
And so finding that language is great because it's duplicative almost, so we can take it out
Yeah.
because of our
We
new.
will when we haven't published that yet, right?
No, the PID we have, we're talking about PID.
Yes, but the change that adds 12,
Well, that's already in there for,
It's in there, it's just worded differently
Right.
today.
in there published or
Yes,
in there for
published.
In there
changes?
published,
Yeah.
yeah.
In there, what's the?
Diane,
paragraph again?
It's 11.
Number 12.
No, it says, it
The
just says.
following
by-
notices have been
the
given
idea.
or are attached.
So it's number 11.
hey, hold on one second, Diane,
Online,
hold on. Go ahead.
It's not on there.
To the conversation that's been brought up in 6E3. Now we have state legislature that's been passed since this was written. So there are forms now that are required one way or the other, and it's silent on the forms. Maybe we should leave what we have done in 7 regarding the public improvement district and a form, and add reference to that regarding the water district.
And I think that's the exact conversation we're having here and whether,
What you were saying.
yeah, and whether 11, does that make that in those other 2 sections with PIDs and MUDs duplicative? Or or is it good to have it in there twice? Because 11, again, states the following notices have been given or are attached to this contract. For example, MUD, WCID, PID,
Yeah.
which we changed that, which to me is saying it's required notices. It's there in a good list. And it removes the concern we have over an addendum, since this new notice isn't phrased as
That
an
answered
addendum.
my question,
Yeah,
because
It is.
I think we run into more properties in water districts than we do in PIDs, and
Which we
the
don't
water
need on
district
Farmer Ranch.
provisions, correct me if I'm wrong, right? The information is not provided to a buyer even after closing. They can terminate and overthrow that transaction. It's that weighty of a matter that I think that if you don't provide the water district information to a buyer, a seller does not, that in one of our Trek courses, it indicated that that is the only place where a transaction could be overturned. If you agree to the PID at closing, that is waiving your rights. But water district in the code is a stronger risk for the
Not,
buyer.
if the form is filed by the title company, which it should, then it cuts off that right. So if you agree to it at closing and that form is filed, then it removes that termination right.
And I appreciate all of that information that we're hearing, but I'm thinking of the agent who's working a transaction with a client. And there's been, I don't think I've seen in all my years of practice as much upheaval over the confusion regarding this form went into effect in June. Then all of a sudden, our local trade association cancels out a form, then puts it back in. All that to say that there was.
This was for the MUD notice?
miscommunication. Yes, yeah, but so clarification and consistency, I would rather let the consumer and the agent know you got a form out there, that don't forget about it. You did that with PID, let's do it with the water district.
My only concern real quick, go ahead.
I think, I'm with you. I think that last sentence on 7, we can remove, because with what was already there as 11.
I think it was
makes that
there before we
legitimate.
did 11.
Yeah,
And we just
and
didn't take it out.
so I think already, and plus we've got additional changes coming to 11 becoming 12, and so that makes it even more, it just makes sense to take it out of 7 instead of adding it to 3, take it out of 7.
And
because
7's
it's covered already.
Yeah, and 7 goes past the requirement. It's not, you're not required to attach it to the contract. It's provided at or before, so we shouldn't be attaching it
Not
if
yet.
not necessarily.
So we go get
So
consumed.
for example, in 9 for propane gas, we say an addendum containing the notice approved by Trek or required by the parties should be used.
Yeah, but we don't say it's attached.
Yeah, but to her point, we do in 11, right now, the way it's worded, it
I
says
think-
they've been given or are attached, and
Okay, so I see
Mhm.
in this general notice paragraph, paragraphs 3, 4, 7, and 9 all talk about giving a statutorily required notice. So perhaps the answer is to just, in each one of those paragraphs, disclose that a notice may be required, but then be silent about whether an addendum is or is not attached, because that's what we're covering under paragraph 11.
Or the new 12.
The new 12.
Yeah,
The new 12.
agreed.
I agree with that.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, yes.
And in 12, we're going to need to be more specific than just using examples.
the amended 12, you said?
The amended, so this goes into thing, do we try to create more specific list or not? And I think the non-inclusive thing, just in case there's other required notices, and the question is, do we then expand it beyond, I think, what we have listed
We can
there?
say, for example, notices described above,
Well, not every notice above's.
for example.
Well, it's just an
Right.
example.
Right, yeah.
But what's wrong with it the way it is? Utility,
Yeah,
water,
Right.
We
drainage.
just came up with that,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
we're rehashing a discussion I think we've already had on that particular.
So
I
let's
think
go to
the
the
amended 12 is good.
Mission creep.
Yeah, let's go to the specific question on removing in paragraph 7, that addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract. Because I do think that's an issue, because it doesn't have to be
Would that
attached.
be again? Would you-
In paragraph 7,
Yeah.
remove the last sentence and addendum.
Which page are you looking
Yeah.
at, the the proposed change documents? Are you online? What's slide?
There's no proposed change right now to paragraphs subsection 7, right? So this is a public improvement districts. So you can look at it on any one of the forms. And the suggestion is take out the last sentence of that subsection 7 that reads, an addendum containing the required notice shall be attached to this contract. We're creating an additional requirement that's not there because you can provide it.
I'm with you.
So I suggest we just take that out, and we have 12 now that fills that
Yeah.
gap.
So then you'd have
So
to
you
take out
need a-
9 too on
Do you want-
program.
Do you want a motion?
Okay, well,
That was,
let's,
hold on,
I think we can put it in there. We don't have to, because we're not
Okay.
pushing this form through. So we don't need a motion.
but you referred to number 3,
3,
4, 7, and 9.
But those say should be. On 7, it says is attached. I mean, there's a difference there.
3 doesn't,
3 is fine.
and 4
And it's
Okay,
older.
That's my point.
Maybe it needs to be brought up to current times. 3. It was important enough when we did 7 to add the addendum. And where it says in 7, the buyer will give buyer written notice, seller will give buyer written notice. Then the reader is going to say, well, how do I do that? Is it an email? No, you said an addendum is required. In this section, it lists a lot of special addenda that are available for the consumer and the agent to use. And we help them knowing it's supposed to be there by listing what it is.
Which I do
Now
think
we
that's
have a
accomplished in 12, because my concern if we put in an addendum or some moves them to using or requiring to use that addendum.
Yeah.
We're here, I think your concern as I'm hearing it, to me is addressed in 12, because that says these are required notices that are attached, for example, and list them. And then if it is an addendum, we can have it, we have to go back to that question whether it's in 22 as well or not.
Has been given or is it?
Yeah, I think it's redundant. Can we all reach agreement
Yes.
that no one is going to be reading all of these individual?
So let- let-
Agreement that agents don't. read,
That's
they
the
just
whole
follow the
reason
law.
we're
To move-
added this 12.
Yeah, to move this along, what if we just have a suggestion of taking that out, and let's look at that paragraph fresh and have an agenda item next time to see
Okay.
if we change anything
So-
else to
Yeah.
keep
All
this
right.
moving.
Just, so are we decide we're taking out of E7. What about E4? Are we taking the last sentence out of in E4 as
I
well?
think we should.
Okay. And what about
9.
9 and 9 as well?
Yes.
Okay, are there any others?
I
Well,
think
that's it. Okay, so we'll take it out of those 3.
And then we can digest
Doesn't
it.
This
say-
gives the agent and the consumer an alert that there is a
This isn't
form
alert,
out
this
there.
is mandatory.
I mean, well, but you were
This
talking
says
about
will,
taking it out.
shall.
We're talking about
Well,
taking
we're
it
putting
out.
it-
But we're putting
Yeah,
it
it
in
says
bold.
seller must give buyer written notice.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
think-
telling them they've got to do it in writing. So taking out, and the last sentence says shall be attached. That's what we're taking out.
And that's fine.
That's what we're doing.
That's what we're taking out.
So
Okay, so I heard that the whole last sentence was being taken out. And it
Yes,
is,
that
if
is.
it's addressed in the
Required
new notice shall be attached to this contract.
yes.
Because
that's
it's
what we said.
addressed in the new paragraph 12
'Cause it's in
that we
12.
did earlier.
That references all those districts directly in there.
So
It
do we
gives a
say-
suggestion of the types of forms, the following notices, and maybe if we go to that, it needs to be the following addenda and notices, because the
No.
PID notice is called an addendum.
Yeah, it doesn't matter though. We'll just take them out if we're going to delete it.
But down here, we're saying, if I'm hearing it correctly, that 12 is going to make up for the specificity in the rest of that section by giving examples of utility, water, drainage, and public utility districts.
Right.
So
Those are just
your
examples.
concern is making sure the consumer or the agent knows there's a form available for that
Yep.
purpose.
Coastal water, I want them to know that propane gas, that there is an addendum out there to be used.
And
So we're not removing those paragraphs out there about propane gas. We're just taking out the last sentence, right?
Saying that it's attached.
So maybe change that instead of saying that it's attached, make it match the other paragraphs where it says must be used.
Yes, if
That's
there is
right.
consistency, then
Some must be used and some must
Well,
not.
it
be
says
used.
that.
We
It
just
says-
have one that we don't want to be used.
Propane gas says seller must give buyer written notice as required by. So there is a notice that's there in 9. 4 says the same thing. And 7 says the same thing. So I think we're good just by
Yeah,
starting.
and I think as we have added things like the PID, we must have thought at the time that it was important to alert the consumer and the agent that there was an addendum.
This still does that though.
Yeah, I think, well, but here, let me finish my thought, is that 3 statutory tax districts have been here for a long time. And things have also been here for a long time, but now we decided that it was important enough to raise the attention to the addenda. So my point there is, for clarity, for education, for disclosure, should we be more specific? That was my only thought.
Yeah, I think the better way of doing it, rather than putting it in this paragraph where no one reads any of the individual things, is that we just make sure make sure that paragraph 22 has a box for each of the notices that we're concerned about. That gives them a checklist. Do I need to attach that addendum for propane and the propane gas system service area?
Okay, that's a whole different, and I agree with you, but that's not what we're doing now. We do not have notices there. That is an actual addenda, and it's plus a random notice or 2. That is very inconsistent, and it ought to be fixed.
I think
It ought to be
we've had a
straightened
pretty
up.
full discussion
Not.
on this one. And so I think we put this in, we're gonna revisit it. We're not pushing this form on. So let's move forward with striking those what we said now, and then we'll look at this again for the next meeting. Because your point is well taken, out there is how does it word it, and is it sufficient enough just in 12, kind of looking at the 2. But maybe we can digest it and come up with some other language in the meantime. But the concern is well taken.
Yeah, I'd also like
Can we also put in 22, just add it in there so it will remind us for discussion, addenda and notices, which are part of this contract, because this is not an addenda.
Yes, I think so. And then we need to add that, where do we have that?
Add whatever we need to add, okay?
That's true.
And we'll pick it back up.
Yeah, I think we.
Let's talk about that later.
Yep. Don't want to open up that can right now.
Ron, as part of the cleanup too, in subparagraph 6, and all the notices, I think we should eliminate that last sentence.
Paragraph 6, you said?
Paragraph
Legislature would
Property
stand
located.
out of
Say crazy
this.
fast.
It would be
Certificated
so much
service
better.
area.
So we can get them organized.
Okay.
You're talking about
We give this notice and we hereby acknowledge.
Did you look at this?
that we
Did you look at the
received
statute on that one?
Yeah, I think we can finish this up pretty quickly. These comments are.
I don't know if that requires, we need to be
It
careful
says
with the
that you
statute.
are- This is. the
Comments are
notice.
quick.
Yeah, so on all these, we need to be careful that the statute doesn't
The statute
require,
doesn't have that wording.
right, yeah.
Fair enough.
All right, so we'll move on. That's, I believe, all the changes and new forms that we have. And so if we look at, I think our next agenda item, discussion and possible action regarding comments received on contract forms since the last meeting. This is agenda item number 5. And we only had a few comments this time. So we don't have any new contracts pushed out there. The first one,
In 10 years, this is the fewest comments I've ever seen.
it's amazing.
You're right.
I can't
Is
believe.
it there?
This
The
is,
same
We
comment.
need to go back to. each
yeah,
of
the same
these.
ones that are repetitive.
I think what we did is okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
We're done.
So the comments are very short. We'll march through these pretty quick. The first one's from Richard Bobo, in which, by the way, the formatting of this, there is a reason in the spreadsheet for multiple reasons this was done. I understand that the spreadsheet originally was pretty hard to read. There's new laws out there that protect or require Trex to remove certain identifying information about agents or license holders in the state. And so you can't put their, I think it's their phone number, maybe their email
They
address.
took
and
everything out,
Everything.
everything.
So there's a lot of disclosure requirements. I personally do like the emails as well, getting that, but there's reasons, good reasons why it's not in there. And with the new format that's being done of being able to enlarge it as the text as big as you need it to read it, because I had a very hard time on the PDF version originally as well. So that is being done, but there is a reason why they're in the spreadsheet format. So the first one's from Richard Bobo. And he wants, I believe, a misunderstanding about how the option fee is credited at closing. He writes in that he's saying he thinks the language incorrectly implies that a buyer gets credit off the sales price for the option fee. And of course, that's exactly what happens. Historically, when we made the change for the payment of the earnest money and option to go to title, we also removed the checkbox that said it will or will not be applied to closing. Because in 99% of the transactions, it always was will apply. And so we had a whole big debate on that, and so we took that out. And I believe this is just his misunderstanding that it's not applied, and he thinks the language suggests it, which it does suggest it, it requires it to be done. So I'm not sure there's any action we can take on that. The second one, Ben Holloway wants additional option money
That's a big issue.
And so I guess brokers, tee that up to y'all, what you think, what you're seeing.
The issue is it's inconsistent. They don't like the consistency that we now given it all to the title. But now when we're asking for an extra option day, now I got to go find the seller. So they're just looking at the into, and I understand what title says. In most cases, by that time, you know, options either sent out or credited, but that doesn't.
It'd be simple to add another one.
Huh?
It'd be simple.
Well, the issue here.
Look at him shaking his head.
Yeah, let me step back. Let me step back to kind of set the stage here. So the additional option money in the amendment has it delivered to the seller, not to the title company. And it has past tense language. It's something we talk about almost every meeting here. It seems like there's comments on it. We did it past tense because we don't want, normally it's $10 or $1, something minimal. Now there's cases where it's substantial, but that's a relatively few and far between. And so we wanted to ensure there wasn't an argument by the seller that, no, he didn't deliver the money actually to me. And they can still make that argument arguably, but the language we have supports the consideration for the option, that it actually has been paid. And so that's why we went with that past tense language. And we've had this request come up multiple times, I think. And the issue here is more of the, not so much another box in the whole provision for additional option money, I don't think, but have it say that should be paid to the title, or, you know, clarifying language on the payment of it.
Yeah, it's inconsistency because we got them trained to take the option to title or wire to title, and when they want extra money, now they're like, do we do Venmo? Does it, I mean, there's just the inconsistency. They like it all one way.
The chairman has his hand up.
Chairman Kessler.
I mean, it's very simple. Option money goes to the escrow agent. If you extend the option money, the seller is signing a receipt on the amendment saying he's received it. Whether it's Venmo, cash, check, or whatever, this agent just doesn't understand. When you sign that amendment extending option period, that is your receipt. And I certainly don't see, because I don't want to go to the title company with $10 to extend the option because the seller didn't have utilities on, but I still want to protect my purchaser. It works the way it is. In everyday life, in the trenches, it works.
Brian.
Okay, and you're absolutely right, Scott. The whole genesis and the history of this clause for the amendment is there's a Texas Supreme Court case from 2004. It's the Joppich case. That says when a seller acknowledges receipt of the consideration for an option, if it is a nominal amount, then it is presumed to be true and it cannot be argued with. And the decision was made, especially with amendments, where amendments are being made at the last second and the new option money is a relatively nominal amount. It's not efficient to give the additional option fee to the title company. And so the amendment was kept that way to make it so that the parties acknowledged that the option fee has been paid, which under the Joppich case would make it so that you cannot argue about it. And as you say, Scott, it's up to the parties before they sign the amendment. Do they want to demand that they've received the money in hand or not?
I mean, we had one state, utilities were not owned. We had to extend it. You still can't do it for zero. Even though our purchaser was in no fault, you still have to pay for it. You give it to the seller, you give the listing agent, but it's compensated with the amendment. this was just totally misunderstood that you should have never delivered additional option money to the title company or escrow agent.
Yeah, I agree with what he was saying. If I'm gonna extend I'm doing the amendment to extend my option days, and I'm doing it on a Saturday afternoon, how am I gonna get it to the title company? How am I gonna have delivered when I can't, because they're not, it needs to go to the seller.
So I agree it needs to go to the seller. What I think the biggest problem is an education issue, because this is one of the number one things I get at least once or twice every week. One, the seller and the agents do not see that as a receipt, and I'm having to explain, and I have a Texas Realtors article saved on my computer that I'm having to send to other brokers and other agents who say, no, it goes to title because of the other one going. No, it goes to the seller. Oh, when do we pay it? Well, seller has received. They don't get it. And most of the time, the money has never even changed hands. So it almost needs to say something. Seller should not sign this form unless they already have the money, the option money or something. I'm just saying that there is a massive misunderstanding around the additional option money and the fact that the seller has it in advance of signing it. Because in majority of the cases, the seller does not have the money in advance of signing that.
Education issue, yeah.
Is it addressed in either of the legal courses?
Not now, currently.
That's awesome.
Well,
I think it's worth
I hate to always be pushing
out
it,
there.
but it is education.
Yeah.
And when we educate them, if we, we say it's for their protection is why it's past tense.
And so, SJ?
I just wanted to, again, add in one of our sort of overarching tenets, because it came up here. And I'm channeling Avis and Kestner. We want to write these contracts to avoid litigation, which is exactly why we follow the logic of jobbage. So it takes the fight away. Okay, we want to avoid litigation for both parties.
No, I have a solution if you want to make this leap. Okay, and we've talked about this for at least 10 or 15 years. So the solution is actually in the current language, because we use the term nominal consideration and the promise to pay, which takes care of jobbage, gets us through our 3-day period, which then the option money then kicks in. So you can have in the amendment box a choice to say for nominal consideration, then nothing passes. You extend the option period out. Or if you want to say for nominal consideration, the obligation to pay whatever specified additional option money is within 3 days, you have those two solutions that are there.
And then we're gonna have to add the language saying, and if you don't pay it at that time, you don't have,
right. But
time is
that's a longer solution. So I think if you want to make the leap, if all of these additional option money extensions are for nominal consideration, which every one I've seen is for nominal consideration,
I don't want to make that.
then just put in nominal consideration. For nominal
and
consideration.
by the way, if it is a significant amount of money, if it's $2,000, I don't know that jobbage applies.
Right.
I
So-
don't think anybody asked us to make that leap.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think we ought to make the leap. I mean, I think we're having a hard enough time with education as it is.
No,
leave it as it is.
I'm just saying, if 90% of these things are $1, $10 to extend the option,
They're not.
Mine aren't.
they're not.
They're not.
We've had some big ones too that have been, and then a lot of times there's more than one thing in an amendment. And a lot of times people don't want to send money prior to making sure that the signatures are all in place and it's a fully executed document prior to sending or Venmoing money to a seller.
Right. I think that's why Ron's wording would help, because it gives a 3-day time period, which we're used to give this additional option money. And it does raise a concern. What happens? How soon do I have to give it? Well, it's a week later. They
How
didn't
long
get
are
it.
these
So
extended?
I think we need to tell them.
Like 1 or
that.
2 days.
They're extended normally 1 or 2 days. Right.
Yeah.
It should be, yes, but it doesn't say that.
24 hours.
Correct.
I just don't think,
This is a solution looking for a problem.
Let's let's have this in our bucket that we read.
Creating a problem.
That's, I think
Let's do
that,
it when it's
yeah, let's,
appropriate time.
I think this is still simmering, but I don't think it's reached above simmering at this point.
We'll say no again.
Say no again, yep. But what point-
Can y'all put that in the bucket with a hole in the bottom?
There you go.
Chairman.
I love it.
Can I move that we take a lunch break so people can eat and make noise?
Not
and then-
everybody.
Not everybody, we can march through this in, I think, about 10 more minutes if we go quick. And that way we knock it out.
I'm just saying.
Is everybody generally okay with that? If we speed through these?
Yep.
Okay.
Fine.
Let's get this. So the next one's actually probably the most substantive suggestion I think we have to discuss is adding a buyer's ability to contribute to seller's closing costs in paragraph 12 is settlement and other expenses. Right now, we have a buyer option or seller option to provide a buyer credit. But I've heard this actually a couple times since our last meeting. And it's interesting, somebody wrote in, this wasn't one of them I talked to, who say, I want to make my offer look better. And you may not want to increase the sales price because of tax reasons or whatever it might be. So let me get an ability to contribute to their closing costs.
We have
think this is
attorneys
legit.
write in language or buyers write in their own language into contracts to contribute to seller closing costs to make their offers look better.
How
Quite
often?
consistently.
Like, only a little bit.
I think it beats the 5% rule. I think this is something we should legitimately consider.
So title people, what do lenders think about that?
We're seeing it, I would say, in the context of short sales now, and we haven't had any pushback on it yet, but it's not happening.
Short sales are pretty unique though, right?
Oh, they're trending up quite a bit lately, but I don't think it's gonna be the buyer that's gonna be paying those fees, that's gonna be so tight on their qualifying situation that lenders are gonna have an issue with it.
So
they're cash deals?
No, but it's the
Doesn't
ones where
involve-
we're not looking for a maximum contribution under the lender's closing instructions.
So
Historically-
this side table, Dan, what do you think on the option?
I think it's been, because it doesn't happen that often, I think it's been handled by exactly what you said. Either have an attorney draft something or provide wording to be put into special provisions that the buyer will pay the following closing costs. And it's a motivational thing to ease either the seller accepting the price based on what he's getting covered in cash. So I don't see that it's a need to be added to the contract. I think it's being handled, as far as I can see, in transactions.
Mary?
And before we
Oh, we
consider
have-
making a change like that, I'd like to hear from lenders as to how they consider that to be. Are they basically saying that's part of the sales price?
Right, historically, that's what we would do, is just raise the sales price because that's more money in the seller's pocket.
But if it's
But
a
I get it if it
conventional
doesn't
loan, and
appraise
it's gotta
or-
appraise,
Yeah,
they
we
don't
got
wanna
issues
pay.
then, sure.
Yeah, so,
See, and that's what I like is because raising it is the appraisal issue, but if I'm gonna give you some money this way, but I agree also,
And on a
we gotta
conventional,
ask the
this
lender
scenario
if this
applies.
is even workable.
So to
It
move
is.
the conversation along, and this is a new kind of thought, what if we put this on the agenda for next meeting? Talk to lenders, see if there's any lender issues that this will raise, so we can have a more fulsome discussion, and then come up with some language, proposed language for the next meeting we can discuss. Instead of trying to craft it today and spending time here drafting with their team instead of
And I
coming
can
with
say the law
suggestions.
of unintended consequences. More people are gonna start saying, ooh,
Yep.
maybe I should start doing that. And
Or
right
selling.
now, you don't have that problem.
I absolutely think it would be heavily used in a seller's market to,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I also think, and I may be, I don't have all the
That's true.
details, but I believe that the lenders are talking about, or maybe there's a push for them to talk about what to do with closing costs in general because of some concerns with regards to who pays for the representation. Right? And the whole DOJ thing, and which obviously is not a Trek thing, but
Right.
Knowing that buyers might be saying, I want to finance in my real estate agent's commission, which is currently not allowed on their
Well, it is on
financing.
they can on conventional.
Right. But I just know that there's discussions going on in the lender world about how that might happen.
Yep.
Right? So maybe this goes in conjunction with that because it's closing cost and how are we gonna, I don't know, just thoughts.
So for committee homework, everybody talk to our lender friends, and let's see what kind of insight we can gain.
Okay.
Hey, the next one, Ramona Brogan wants the paragraph 70 disclosures to be in a separate addendum, which we have discussed at length many times. Decided not to do that. The next one's from Robin Harris, which we've already gone over, about making consistent provision versus paragraph in 2A and 2B. Then we have the Metro Texas Association of Realtors through Kathy Faulkner has made a suggestion that they want the termination rights under the condo contract in paragraph 2B2 to be blank instead of 7 days, along with the termination rights and the HOA addendum that is 3 days to also be blank. Or in the alternative, I think, to make them consistent.
I think it's statutory 6 days, isn't it?
Yeah, but remember, we made this a contractual right independent of the statutory right.
So in the condo contract, to step back there, there's a termination right that we have that is 7 days after receiving the association documents.
Mm-hmm.
There's a statutory provision that requires this similar type of notice. I think it's a 6-day period that we went over. But just because it's in the statute doesn't mean we can't create a new one contractually.
And the problem is in the statute, it says you have to get notice by certified mail return receipt request.
Exactly.
And so.
So we have,
Stubbing your toe.
there's a
Right.
reason it's in there. And I think what she's bringing up should be blank to negotiate the time period instead of having the set 7 day or 3 day. And that's her main point. So I personally like it being the 7 days and 3 days to have it there, but I'll tee it up to y'all in practice. Have you had this request?
I don't have a stomach to change it.
I still don't understand how we're complying with the statute if we shorten it.
Well, we're actually longer, right? We're 7 days.
No, but if we put a blank, it allows it
Somebody
to.
would shorten it, wouldn't be, and they wouldn't know that
Oh,
they're
that's
not
true.
following
Yeah.
statute.
So we can make it different, but yeah, that's, but not short.
Not less than, and I think that'll be confusing, so I just leave it at 7.
Because they're still gonna go less than.
I think you'll have too many people just picking an arbitrary
Yeah.
date.
Or not
Okay.
filling it in at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And they
yeah.
can sign an amendment. Is this true? If it, say I need more time. So I'm following this example. I need more time to have my lawyer review things. Can't I amend the contract to give me a longer date?
Yes.
And I do want to pat Metro Tex Association of Realtors on the back for looking at these types of issues. I wish we got more comments that people looked at this and made these types of suggestions. So kudos to them for that.
Is there any wording in the condo code or the property codes that would require to stay within a certain number of days?
Not for this issue. There is a requirement for if you give notice under that statute, but there's nothing that prevents us from doing what we did to give our own termination right, essentially.
Okay, so by putting that blank in, they could ask for 2 days, and that would be
Be
against
wrong.
statute.
Arguably, I'm not 100% convinced on that, but I think that's probably the case.
Thank you.
So the next one, again from Kathy Faulkner, wants to add Fox to buyer's notice of termination for failure to deliver required HOA POA documents. So there's a termination right under the addendum for HOA addendum that allows the buyer to terminate if they haven't received the required documents.
She just doesn't want it another. She wants it out.
Correct. And so
I don't think
Put in
that's-
the notice of termination.
the notice of buyer's termination.
I don't feel strongly either way on that.
Whatever.
We use that provision.
How often does this happen? I mean, really?
Not that.
Well, I
I
mean,
think it's the
It works.
moving to 2 pages issue.
Yes.
We talked about.
yeah, we definitely want to keep it one
Other-
page.
So we'll have that in the back too, if we ever revise that termination notice, maybe to add that in. Good reasons it's not. All right, next one, Kelly Kellner believes the language about approval of restoration of seller's entitlement to a VA loan is confusing. And I actually agree with this. This takes some reading of what he put in. I had to read this several times to understand what he was saying. But we have a sentence, if you pull up the,
Kelly's a girl.
oh, Kelly's a girl.
I
It doesn't even matter.
Okay, so it can, so if you go to the
Addendum for
the
release of liability.
release for assumption VA loan addendum.
I'll pull it up here.
It's a girl. She's a pretty girl.
But we can't publish names, so, or publish identifying information.
All right, maybe we should just say this, we don't even know if they're a licensee. We'd have to call them this person.
Okay, so the concern is, scroll down to, what is this?
I'm not gonna go there.
Restoration.
I know it. I know it is.
Where do we go here?
Back up.
Yeah, back up, I think. It's under B.
Yeah, that's,
Under B right here. If restoration has not been approved by the closing date, check one of these boxes. In the concern here, if we read the broader one first, within so many days, the seller and buyer shall apply for restoration of seller's VA entitlement. They shall furnish all the information and documents required by the VA. And there's something here, he makes a distinction of approval and restoration. Let's see, approval, termination language is automatic. So the contract, if a restoration has not been approved, which he's saying it doesn't have to after closing sometimes. Because you have to pay off the existing loan in order to have it fully approved. And our language right now is saying it hasn't been approved by the closing date, then the contract automatically terminates.
Well, it could, you gotta click one.
Well, but what he's saying is it's not approved until the loan's paid off. So would you ever have a situation where before closing, it's technically approved?
But it's not resolved until after the close.
Are you talking about conditional?
well, sometimes it's not even, sometimes it's like approved subject to that payoff.
It's a conditional
Right.
approval, right?
So he said, we have explained that it can be approved, but not restored after closing. So I'm not sure the nature of that, 'cause I don't deal a lot with VA, so.
Okay, I don't understand this. We're only talking about loans that are assumed, so it's not being paid off.
It's not being paid off, but the seller is wanting his entitlement.
To be able to purchase something.
He's wanting his entitlement back, so he's gotta get
And
released.
they're saying, well, the final restoration doesn't occur until it's closed.
Yeah, so what happens is the money is received, they then give the document that says you're clear to go borrow again.
This was one I didn't know was a potential issue until now it's being highlighted.
But I think that's what that means, doesn't
Do
it?
they give a conditional?
That's what I just
approval?
asked. So it's conditional on them receiving the money, but it's
It's
approved.
approved, but it's not restored.
I think Scott, or the chair, has
Yes.
his hand up, but he's
Right.
nodding.
Oh, he probably knows, because they do
Yeah,
a
it's a
lot.
lot of VA.
Chairman Kessler?
Yeah, this is, Ron's right, this is strictly on the entitlement. And if it is a VA loan and a veteran is assuming it, there is a really good chance that their entitlement will be restored. If it is conventional, it will not be restored until that assumed loan is paid off whenever. But it is a VA, you can get entitlement restored. I agree it's confusing, but we're using a lot of them now. We're having a lot of VAs assumed.
So
But
is it,
it's strictly, it's strictly restoring their entitlement.
do you think the confusion rises to the level of needing to revise this language? Or is it something that resolves itself in most cases?
You know, I really never paid attention to language until this comment came in.
That seems to
We've
be
never
the,
had a VA where it was not restored. Does that make sense? So, yeah, it is confusing the way it's worded.
But it can't be restored if the buyer's not a veteran, right? And a
Right.
non-buyer can still buy the property.
Yes,
On the
And-
assumption you are
Oh,
correct.
yeah.
Just cannot assume it.
do we add a word of conditionally approved or whatever the terminology is that
No,
fits
because
what?
I think it's the restoration is the right term because it says restoration of seller's VA entitlement. So that when you use the term restoration, you're saying the contract will, if the restoration of seller's VA entitlement has not been approved. But their restoration has been approved at closing date. It's just that has not yet been restored.
Right.
I think the terminology is correct. It may just be
That's interesting.
confusing in terms of what does restoration mean?
And this isn't the right way to say it, but basically is the concept, if restoration has not been approved, subject to closing occurring by the closing date. mean, there is not a unconditional approval. There's always a condition to the approval that closing occurs.
But this is prior to the restoration, not approving it.
I think in 10 years, this is the only comment I've ever seen on this.
Yeah.
I do think we're going to be doing more and more assumptions. I mean, we're going, that's coming, yes. But we've only had one comment. I think we would be premature to try to do something now. I think we wait and see how this shakes out. Because this might be something different than we even think of right now.
Okay, we'll move on. I think that's good. Thank you, Kelly Kellner, for that comment. Shannon Potts wants us to put the 7E disclosures in a separate document, which we've gone over. Jessica Wagner wants an unapproved property listing agreement, which we as TREC do not promulgate listing agreements.
Can I make a comment on that, John?
Yes.
Okay, and this maybe is an education thing, but our promulgated contracts are required to be used, right? If we produce one, the licensee has to use our form or a form that is substantially similar produced by an association. Okay. There is absolutely nothing stopping this gentleman from having a lawyer or himself writing up on a napkin or a 27-page listing agreement. He is not only allowed to use forms promulgated by TAR, whatever they are now, TR. I mean, it tells him to talk to a private attorney, but maybe this is something for education more than it is now, but he is not limited by any means.
Because he's a party to the contract and you
That's
can
right.
always represent yourself.
That's right.
The whole point we have promulgated forms is the unauthorized practice of law statutes
Exactly.
that say you can't do a contract for somebody else.
That's right.
With the exception of TREC promulgated contracts. But he's a party to the listing agreement, so he can do anything he wants.
Good. Point well taken. All right, so we'll move on to Barbara Gilbertson, who doesn't like a trend she is seeing with the sellers hiding the condition of their home by using the quote unquote useless TXR, I think she meant to say TREC forms, but she said TXR forms. So, but hey, we'll take it, TXR. And thinks, she wants to know what we can do. And this is one thing we go back to, except for the disclosures in the farm and ranch and the new home contracting unapproved, we do not add any seller's disclosures, right? That's all in straight out of the statute and we stick to it. The only reason we've done those contracts with seller's disclosures is because under 5AA of the property code, you don't necessarily have to provide them. If it's farm and ranch property that has less than 5% its value in the improvements, then you don't have to provide it. Unapproved property, you don't have to provide it. And new homes generally don't have to provide it. So there's really nothing more we can do. This is a education issue and a professional issue.
She's asking for more enforcement.
And they are.
Not us.
Yeah, there's.
File a complaint.
Okay, so we'll move on from that to the last page of comments. And then we, I guess, have a couple additional ones supplemental. Yep. So we go to the supplemental ones. Is that them?
So there's a printout, yeah.
Oh, okay. Very good.
Yeah, does anybody need one?
No, that's not, no.
That's not it.
Those are the
Oh.
Yeah, this is what you want.
Yeah, promulgated listing form.
If we got, if we were able to have information.
Okay.
Yes.
This is the same
Yes.
conversation we were just having.
Yep, so we already talked about Mark Russo's comment about promulgated listing forms, which we've just talked at length. And then the last one from Jeremy Michael Reed is wondering if we had our radar to look at a contract for packaged properties. And so I think the concern here is when you're selling multiple properties in a transaction, to use one contract or multiple contracts.
And if you're selling 5 single families, just get on the 1 to 4 family because you're selling 5.
And here, this is.
You hire a lawyer.
That's
Good
what.
job, Dan.
Yep.
Right.
hire a lawyer.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that's a general
not.
consensus of this committee.
Yes.
So that's all of our comments there. We do have 3 cases in here. And just to quickly run through those, I highly recommend everybody read these cases. There's some great contractual language in there. I'll just briefly summarize them if anybody wants to talk about it. But the first one's Brown versus Gilmore. This case is out of San Antonio Fourth Court Appeals, dealt with an option termination dispute under the old version of our contract. And the facts of the case was the earnest money, or the option money and the earnest money were delivered to the title company. And our old forms, of course, you were delivered to the seller. But what the seller's agent did here was said, deliver it to title. And then they said, the seller tried to say, no, that wasn't effective at the end of the day. So really, it seems like there was a disconnect between the seller's agent and the seller. And the court ultimately held that, no, the seller told you where to deliver the earnest money and the option money. There's nothing in the contract that prohibits you saying where the money goes. And so if you go, the exact language is, court highlighted that the contract is silent on how money should be paid. And so you are to pay it to the seller, but it doesn't say how to pay to them. If they say to pay to the title company, then that is sufficient to satisfy that. So just a contractual construction case. The next one is,
I think that one has implications though on instructions generally.
Yes.
Or other parts of the contract, or perhaps overriding what's negotiated with other instructions. So
absolutely.
That's a concern.
And that's very important. As agents out there need to understand the instructions they give as an agent for their party is going to be binding on their principal, the buyer or seller. And that's something I think that agents get themselves in trouble a lot by not having that discussion and just doing what they always did. So if you do something, make sure you tell your client in writing and get the permission to do it. The next one is the one I think everybody should read. It has great language about the calculations of deadlines. It's a Supreme Court case that came out earlier this year in April. And I'm just going to read one of the first paragraphs here. Again, it says contracts regularly address time when a contractual relationship begins or ends, by when a party must perform, after when it has become too late to do so. Such vital matters illustrate that contractual clarity is often every bit as important when talking about time as about anything else. Clarity comes from sound drafting, but sound drafting relies on confidence in the court's ability and willingness to consistently interpret similar provisions. And I think this is guidance for us just in all we do here for our contractual clarity. And we talked about that issue in 2B of having, before closing, 3 days before closing, how do you calculate that? And this has a great discussion, particularly on, it was after or from or after, what does that mean? And quickly, it's an oil and gas case, but it was from January 1st, 1 year period from January 1st. And so they said the measure date is not January 1st. The measure date is the measure date, January 1st, but you start counting January 2nd because you don't count the measure date. And that's the default rule. Unless you specify otherwise in our contracts when we draft, we have to keep that in mind, that if it's from, after, before, whatever, you do not count the measure date as a matter of common law. And so the court then said the 1 year period ends on January 1st because you get a full 1 year from January 2nd to January 1st. And the parties in this case were arguing was the year when it's from January 1st ending on December 31st or January 1st. And the court unequivocally said, no, it's January 1st. You don't count that date, so it's counted in that whole year period. So it's a really good case with great language.
Big consequence.
Yes.
In that case, it was huge.
The last one is a criminal case. And this was about when an indictment is time barred.
I put it in there for just the timing question, because they do cite the government code generally, as opposed to not just the code of criminal procedure. So, yeah.
So it's a great time period construction case as we're looking at some of these particular issues. I don't know if you want any of the details of the case.
No, this one measured years, so it was interesting, but it was and it didn't matter which way you interpreted the term year in this case, but it goes to the same principle. It's better to be precise about your commencement and ending date.
And it was an interesting one because there was 2 days that weren't included, one on the front end, one on the back end in this period because of the statutes that were at issue. But it's good just for the general contract language or counting days language. So with that, let's see, discussion, that ends our discussion on agenda item 6, discussion of possible action regarding recent court cases. Number 7, discussing possible action regarding future agenda items and meeting dates. I think we went over the agenda items largely today. Does anybody have any they want to put on for the next meeting? Without that, our next meeting we have scheduled for January,
Yeah.
January 12th. I can't believe I can see 2024 already.
Right.
And then the proposed future meeting of April 12th.
But, Mr. Chairman, I would suggest that people plan, if they can, to come the night before, for an optional Dutch treat, happy hour or dinner, where no business will be conducted, but that the committee can maybe get to know each other a little more. We do that occasionally. And we haven't done it in a while, other than.
It's great to get to know each other past the committee. So we'll definitely plan on that next time, be unofficial get together.
David, Tony. Just kidding.
One question about the next dates. Vanessa, though, commission next meets when?
November 7th.
November 7th? So they'll publish the new notice.
Yeah, right, we'll propose.
And then they're probably not going to do that on an emergency basis, I assume. Okay, so will January be the right time for that? To hear any comments coming back, or because are they coming back in February, the commission, or?
So we'll have comments to consider. It should work, but let me look. So what he's asking is, so it's gonna propose a few days after November, whenever it gets into the register, then you've got that time to receive comments, and then this group reviews those comments at its January meeting, and then ultimately propose for or recommend for adoption at the February meeting.
But what if there was no comments back for us? Then it just rolls on, right?
Well, then you just don't consider comments at your meeting. I think he's asking about, is there enough time between?
I didn't know when
And there.
I didn't know Trek was doing a December meeting or something. Okay. Then we're
Only
good.
very special, stressful occasions.
Okay.
Yeah, you should be fine in terms of timing.
Okay.
We want to review the minutes and approve the minutes.
This is TR.
I gave a few updates to Ron that were.
No, that was from the last minutes, but those were previously approved. He's talking about these minutes.
So these minutes.
Yeah. So let me put these for you.
We haven't approved these yet.
We approved them at the last meeting.
Actually, we did.
We started approving them.
It's not in the minutes that we approved the minutes. So that's another thing.
Do it again.
We have done that before. I thought we
Your
didn't do it last time.
So I moved to approve all
Overwhelmed. I
passes.
was overwhelmed.
It's supposed to be.
Like that?
Yes,
Oh,
unfortunately,
on
yeah.
yours, yes. On hers as well.
Yes,
Bring this up.
just ridiculousness of it.
John, you tell me when to scroll up.
I'm good so far.
Mary, by January, you're gonna have a new computer. You can have a new computer.
There we go.
And Christine.
You know, I'm gonna totally get your name wrong. Many years to come, many years to
You better
come.
get it right. but you haven't.
Yeah, phone number.
I gave up the seat for you.
As Jason.
And is,
Right.
I stand corrected.
Sunset is not really a word, is it? I should say, maybe like that. Roy says
dissolved?
dissolved.
When in doubt, just.
See, if I
It's
if I can
eradicated.
ask for clarity on the,
I think just the group is dissolved.
back up addendum, what action, if any, are we to take as far as moving forward on that? I know we
So
said
the
we'd
working-
talk about the
Working
next.
group just needs to get together.
We need to,
Yeah.
let's say by the end of next week, let's have a date scheduled for us to meet.
Yes, and I'll resend what I sent
Okay.
a couple months ago.
Perfect. And we have a new committee.
Oh, yay. I have her card.
You have no F.
Thank you.
I still don't think, on E, should the work be dissolved or just the working group is concluded? And what happened?
Going away.
He had sunsetted in there.
Right. But the work itself
It's work.
Yeah. Oh,
isn't,
Closed.
it's
the
closed.
group is done,
That's a-
but
That's a
the
good word.
work is, I like that better. Good job, Brian.
Is that do we have a separate one for adding that to the other contract?
That's what I was about to say. Came out of the farm and ranch.
I should say in all applicable contracts, right?
Yep.
Oh, and I guess it's just the two in farm and ranch, right? Okay.
Did we decide?
We deleted 4 and changed 2
That was
to 8.
I remember that was the blue language.
That's the,
Yes, we'll move past that real quickly now.
Yes.
Please, just keep going, keep going.
And again, just for everyone who's new, with the exception of that notice that's gonna go to the meeting, the committee today decided to make these changes. They'll likely all come back to you again for review, but nothing is going to move forward at this time other than that change. And that's, I'm sure as brokers, because you don't want contract form changes all the time.
And one other thing too, when it comes back for changes or after the comments, we can make non-substantive changes without having to republish. But once it becomes a substantive change, then we have to publish it again. So right. So we try to get as tight as we can before we send it on, so we don't have to keep publishing.
And confusion. I'm good, you can scroll.
Scroll down there. Hold on.
Not quite all the way.
The parties will reasonably cooperate and accomplish the same, provided the non-exchanging party will not incur one additional expense to post and on the day. I think the I needs to be in front of or after provided.
Yep.
Yeah,
like that.
I get that.
You want,
good catch.
well, then,
They won't incur.
oh, I see what you're saying.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
Yep.
Did I lose my request that paragraph A intends to be changed to may?
You did lose. We outvoted you on that one.
Yeah, I think you did.
I voted for you, Brian.
I like the paragraph about the encouraging the seller to use the postage. I think that looks.
I do too.
The only thing that's in my mind with that sentence is use the post-it form on the district. That just seems odd.
How about
Should be form
use the
provided by
form.
district's website.
Yeah, or form, you post it, it's a move that.
Use the form
language.
posted.
You want to say on
Website.
the district's website?
Yeah, we can just take out post it.
I'm okay with that.
Should be available.
Notice available, yeah, we can do available and stuff.
How about that?
I think you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Is it the form of notice or notice form?
The form of notice is use the language in the statute, so we just went with that, but we can change it.
Looks good to me. Anybody get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Everybody in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You're gonna have to be here at 4:53 is what these minutes say. Y'all just approved them.
You did that last one.
Make that 12:58.
Hey, we worked really hard and long. We're trying to boost our stats for the Sunset Committee here. Well, right at 1 o'clock, which was kind of the guesstimate of this meeting. So thank you everybody for, coming today and welcome new members. This does get exciting sometimes and sometimes it gets boring, but this will probably be the least amount of comments we ever received. Normally there's one meeting, we had a all-day meeting, most went in the second day with hundreds and hundreds of comments. We had to summarize them.
We
and-
usually have a lot more comments.
We've almost had a 2-day meeting.
We have. There's been a couple of times that we've gone like past 5.
So a motion to adjourn real quick before we do this. Motion.
So moved.
All right, seconded. All right, we're
I
adjourned.
didn't think we had.
Um,